this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
You're listening to a podcast, so you're doing something else too, like maybe scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving places you like without thinking you'll get them, because that's what house hunting has become. But Redfin isn't built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. Redfin agents close twice as many deals as other agents, which means when you find a place you love, you've got a real shot at getting it. Redfin helps turn saved listings into real addresses. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Flag football is exploding, and iFlag is leading the way. As the Guinness World Record holder, iFlag hosts premier flag football tournaments nationwide for boys, girls, high school girls, and adults. From first-time players to elite competitors, iFlag delivers top-level competition, unforgettable experiences, and a community built around the game. Ready to be part of it? Join the movement. Find your tournament and learn more at iflag.org. That's iflag.org.
Cool Zone Media.
Hey everybody, Robert Evans here, and I wanted to let you know this is a compilation episode. So every episode of the week that just happened is here in one convenient and with somewhat less ads package for you to listen to in a long stretch if you want. If you've been listening to the episodes every day this week, there's going to be nothing new here for you, but you can make your own decisions.
This is It Could Happen Here. I'm Garrison Davis. The past few years, we have regularly covered the rise of legislation that restricts access to public space and medical care for trans people in the United States, as well as attempts by politicians, lobbying groups, and media personalities to drum up transphobia in hopes of, quote-unquote, eliminating transgenderism from our society and culture. The quest to eliminate transgenderism includes harassment campaigns targeted against specific individuals, boycotting companies that feature trans people in their marketing, and banning queer books, media, and art from libraries across the country. The conservative right has decided that the boogeyman of gender ideology and the woke mind virus is one of the most pressing threats to Western civilization. This brand of transphobic militancy opposes any form of visible queerness, viewing it as an ideology that acts as a viral cultural contagion. That's why they spend so much time trying to ban drag shows and art featuring queer people. They know they're losing the cultural battle, and that really scares them. As trans people have been trying to weather this huge wave of organized transphobia, trans and queer artists continue to push forward, with multiple hit films coming out this year from trans directors, and trans actors and actresses are taking more and more high-profile roles. Last episode, I interviewed comedian Ella Yerman and filmmaker Vera Drew on the process of creating independent queer media. This episode will focus on why we are seeing this new wave of queer art, why mere representation isn't enough, and attempts to go beyond the online media ecosystem. Ella Yerman is the host of Late Stage Live, a queer Gen Z public access late night show on Brooklyn Public Access and YouTube. The format of late night comedy is almost wholly dominated by old white cis straight men. Late Stage Live attempts to deconstruct the genre in which it aligns itself with, utilizing sketches, correspondent segments, and original reporting, but for a younger, queerer, more politically radical audience. The show is not just made for Gen Z queers, it's also made by an entire team of young queer and trans people, which gives it a very unique feel compared to literally all of its competition. The show itself feels queer and highlights the massive gap between simple queer representation and queer art, or in this case, queer late-night comedy. There's a palpable distinction between hiring a gay person to work on Seth Meyers versus having a late-night show that is built on queerness. On that note, here's a clip from my interview with Ella Yerman, host of Late Stage Live.
There's like a huge difference between like the token queer writer and like a show that centers queerness and transness. And I'm really proud of that as in terms of our show. Like, I think that's one of its main drives is how queer focused it is. Something we talk about in every episode, in every piece. Reed loves to hammer this home is sort of the question of why us. It's the first question we ask when anyone pitches any segment or piece or story of like, the question is like, what's the game? What's the perspective? And then why is it us delivering this perspective? Because anyone can write a piece of political analysis. Lots of people do. But like, what about this story is uniquely coming from us, uniquely coming from the host, Ella, from the writer's room? And I think we found it most strongly in the last two pieces, the Libs of TikTok piece. And then the episode before that, we did a segment on the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a spooky, evil, conservative cabal that trains lawyers to overturn SCOTUS cases. And I think those both felt really focused in on sort of us as young queer people. And I think the Gen Z part is also really relevant for us. A lot of late night is hosted by old men. And as much as I love Jon Stewart, he is an old man, an old cis white man, an old cis, as far as I know, heterosexual white man.
Who already left the job 10 years ago.
And he already left it, right, and he's back now. But like, what does that say about anything?
Yeah.
And everyone talking about politics is like old white guys, and everyone in Congress is old white guys or George Santos. And there's like this sense of like the world is ending, as you probably know on this show that bills itself as like amidst the collapse or whatever your tagline is. But like Gen Z is so uniquely affected by political goings on in a way that I suppose this is true of every youngest generation, that like all of the decisions are impacting us most, but it feels more urgent these days because the world is ending with climate change and with the encroaching, global fascism and with the decay of late stage capitalism, that it feels so important now more than ever to like center those experiences and look at how the world and the news and politics impacts these groups of people. And the way we achieve that is, we don't just have one token queer writer. Our room is all queer, largely trans. About half of our writers' room is non-white. And as we grow, that number will either stay the same or get bigger, certainly not smaller. At the end of the day, I think the fact that the room is completely queer and predominantly trans and non-white and all young, it just like sort of happens. And the fact that it started that way and has been built from the ground up that way, I think gives us a huge edge. Even if The Daily Show fired all of their writers and hired only trans people, I think it would be a hard pivot to get the show to suddenly be doing what we're doing, just because the whole structure is built differently.
In Vera Drew's new movie, The People's Joker, an autobiographical transgender coming-of-age parody set in the Batman universe, the shallowness of queer representation is actually one of the core themes of the film. In the movie, the main character is not satisfied by simply being a token diversity hire for a late-night comedy show, and instead hijacks the airwaves and charts her own path. This plotline, like many others, mirrors the director's own life, and the movie itself is a perfect example of how creating a piece of art inherently built on a multimedia experience of queerness will produce a wildly different result than simply having a gay person in the writer's room. Here's a clip from my interview with Vera Drew.
It's not even that I feel like queer representation is like too straight or cis. It's just not even like an accurate reflection of queer reality, like every gay couple I know is nothing like a straight couple. I mean, some of them are, but like those gay couples always break up. Like it's like they're just in reenacting cycles and thousands of years of patriarchal bullshit on each other when they could just be having hot gay sex with each other. And like that to me is like the biggest tragedy of like representation, and it like is also why I think people lash out at us so much. Like I on one level, I understand the idea of like, this is getting shoved down our throats, because like it kind of is. That's coming from a place that I sort of agree with, because they're getting sold this like propaganda that it's like, they're just like us, and like, to me, it's like my experience is so specific to me and so specific to, like the experience of a trans woman. There are things about my life that are similar to that of a cis woman, but certainly not identical. So like, I never want to see art that is that. I'm like really over trans people being used in a way that they're either, I mean, it doesn't really happen anymore where they're like treated like freaks, but like, it's kind of the tragedy porn or kind of pedestalizing us, I guess. Like, yeah. I hate that like, my identity is inherently political, like just because this is who I am. Like it's not a pleasant situation to deal with. So I think with Joker, People's Joker, I really wanted to talk about representation in a way that also just wasn't annoying, because like it's not even that I'm tired of having this conversation. It's just sad that people like us keep even having to have this kind of conversation, because like, I've also heard it now within our own community that like, I've heard other trans filmmakers say like, we should only be telling happy stories. We should only be spreading queer joy or whatever.
Absolutely not.
No, absolutely not. Like that's embarrassing.
Yeah. No, I want to spread queer panic. I want to not even panic, just like queer existential horror, I suppose. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, I mean, for me, it's like, I don't know, like, because I've gotten shit too. I haven't gotten a lot. And now, honestly, that I've started mentioning it in the press, people haven't said it to me as much, which is good. But like, I was getting a little bit of the like, making the Joker a murderous trans woman. Okay,
please.
First of all, like, villains are queer coded. It's the history of film.
Almost all of the Batman villains are queer coded.
Exactly, completely. And like, why can't we do it like not in a subtext way? Why can't we just do it directly? And then also, like, I live in a country that villainizes trans people. So like, why can't I process that very thing by making myself a queer villain in a movie that I made? And I don't know, it's like, I think what I hate about the queer joy thing and the like, the People's Joker is like a very funny movie. It's very colorful. Yes. It's very campy, but it's also like devastating. You know, like it's got a very serious message to it that I think it brings up a lot of emotion in people when they watch it, both cis people and trans people. And, I think that speaks to something else just like about representation, is like, I told this story that was so specific to my experience, and like trans people are identifying with it and relating to it, but so are cis people, like, yes, like, we should be telling stories that portray the trans experience honestly, or the queer experience honestly and specifically. And if we do that effectively, that is still art that a cis person can consume, because cis people also go through transition. Cis people also have to die and be reborn sometimes. And like, I think just everybody kind of comes of age. It's just like trans people and queer people kind of have to do it more visibly and publicly and externally a lot of the times. And I don't know, for me, it's like, that was like another reason too, of just being like, no, like, we're gonna get this out into theaters and like make this kind of a theatrical experience before anything else. It was always made to be like viewed, I think, with like a crowd of people, like kind of like a midnight movie vibe, I guess.
when you think about it, Jesus and the Joker do have a lot in common in terms of getting baptized, getting born again. It's really very similar characters.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's why, because I think this was something while Brie and I were writing the movie that she was constantly every step of the way like, what are you doing? Like, why are you bringing this much like Gnostic Christianity to this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I remember, there's this like French song that's in the movie called I'll Be Your Joker was composed and performed by Emily Sloan. And the lyrics to that are a poem that I wrote that are just, and you never, like, it's not in anywhere in the movie. It's just in that song, but it's like this, it's the People's Joker prophecy. Like I actually wrote it in this like kind of Gnostic Bible structure. And then we translated it to French and recorded it as a song. And like, that was like really kind of coming from that place of like, just really, I'm obsessed with Jesus. And I kind of just always have been. Like I was raised Catholic, and I'm not Christian, but I have a lot of Jesus stuff around my house. Like I'm just obsessed with like the iconography and really love it. The story itself as like a myth and like the mythic understanding of death and rebirth, and also just thinking of it as like another example of like the hero's journey. And I don't know, like it's somebody asked me at a Q&A like basically like how do you have the balls to like, because by the end of the People's Joker, like you basically find out it's like it is like Dune. There's like a weird Messiah story happening, and that partially just comes from like, I think for me, queerness is inherently like a very spiritual experience. It just has been for me. And I think a lot of trans people actually deal with Messiah complexes. I think it's something that I feel safe saying I have. And I also really wanted to unpack that just idea of the like Joseph Campbell white savior hero's journey thing.
It Could Happen Here will return after these messages. We now return to It Could Happen Here. During my interview with Vera Drew, she mentioned something about not just wanting to throw the movie up on YouTube when the film was dealing with legal issues resulting in uncertainty around how the film would be released. And that got me thinking about queer people's relationship to platforms like YouTube as the sort of default way of sharing video art. A big reason why is simply because the platform is so accessible, without many of the hurdles and roadblocks of more traditional distribution models. But sometimes I worry that it's become so default that our reliance on YouTube has actually become a self-limiting factor that overdetermines the scope of our own art. Let's return to my interview with Vera Drew to continue this topic. Queer people, specifically trans people, have kind of been stuck with a lot of their like art or video art just becoming this thing that you throw up on YouTube. We've done a good job in making like a community there, I suppose, but at certain points it feels very like insular. Like we've created this little tiny bubble that everything is just trapped inside of. Because obviously we can't like rely on like big studios to make our own stuff or distribute our own stuff. Like that's not happening either. But I feel like we're kind of kicking ourselves in the foot if our only artistic output is like techno music and YouTube video essays, both of which can be good, both of which can be art. But there's a whole other world out there that I feel like we have closed ourselves off from. And so I'm kind of interested in on that choice to like not put it on YouTube and actually like ride this thing out as like a movie.
Yeah, I mean, that is it's such a relief to hear you talk about it in that way, because I never want to just be dismissive of online creators.
Sure.
Like I worked in TV for 10 years as an editor, and I was very fortunate to work on a lot of really cool shit. Like I worked on, my first job was, I was an intern on the Eric Andre show. And like, then my job immediately after that was on Nathan For You. So I really got to work with like all these really amazing comedians, many geniuses. And in that process, like always knew I had wanted to make film. Like my earliest memories are wanting to make films. Like right around the time I saw Batman Forever, I was like, I want to be a director. I came up in post-production just because like a lot of editors end up sort of following, a lot of editors are really just frustrated directors. So I was kind of like, here's a place where I could like sort of learn my craft. And I've always loved experimental animation and visual effects and stuff. And also just like incorporate that as well into like my career. And it's good. I'm so glad I had it as like an incubation period for me to kind of find my voice and my aesthetic and learn a lot from these like super talented people. But there was always this frustration that I had because when I would take stuff out to pitch or anything that was like my own story, like you can't really get trans art made in any sort of mainstream space. I think that's one of the things that's most frustrating about the whole like woke culture bullshit, just because it's like they act like we're some sort of like elite class that's like favored by the media, which it's like, I can just tell you, like, that's I'm on my press week right now. Like the media is certainly enamored with trans people, but like I don't think it's like coming from a place of like we're trying to change and put everything in, make these people in charge. It's just it's clickbaity and it keeps people arguing online. So it was very hard just to even break through as a director too. Like, I mean, I was at that, forget pitching shows that I've written or whatever, like just trying to get episodic TV work. I just couldn't do it. Like once I changed my pronouns, like I was literally up for jobs that went away after I came out. So I just reached this point of like, I think maximum frustration and kind of like wanted to, whatever I did, I don't want to say like I was ready to walk away from like working in the industry in 2019, but I kind of was. Like I was kind of just at this point where I was like, I need to make a fucking movie or something on my own and kind of just put all I have into that. And that's going to be the way people will either finally take me seriously as a director, or like I'll at least have made a movie and then I can just be in debt and I'll have a movie I made. So to me, it was always about not necessarily like finally being taken seriously by my industry, but just like kind of making this giant piece of art that is not only like a big, like, look what I can do, style thing, but like is also just about all of that, about the frustration of being allowed in, but only being allowed in these certain ways, like whether it's on like a diversity cast or like, whatever. Like I worked on the show. I can't really talk about it because it's like NDA stuff and I don't think the show will ever come out. But I was in the writer's room on a cartoon that was being rebooted, and it was one of my favorite cartoons of all time. But I had a day where I was like just sitting in the writer's room and I was like looking around at my coworkers, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, it's all girls and I'm a girl and I'm a trans girl. We're all just being brought in to rehabilitate this like problematic piece of art, and it was like this crazy moment of having like also have had lost jobs because of my identity, and now being in this place where it's like my identity is like this bargaining chip. So anyway, how does this connect to the online art conversation? Like I've always kind of had to also play in like online spaces. Like I started a public access station with my friends a few years ago called Highland Park TV. A few years ago, it was like 10 years ago now, but that's still going on today. And it was basically just this space for us where we could like just record whatever, we'd meet up one week and come with like some pretty simple sketches and shoot it on our public access set and throw it up online. And, like 12 people would watch it and that was it. But that was cool. Like, you build like little followings and communities that way. And I had always just wanted to break out of that, because I think my sensibilities are pretty me and edgy and weird. But like, I'm really kind of a basic bitch. Like when it comes to the stuff I like I really like, my taste is very college dorm room. I have a Back to the Future tattoo. Like I'm very influenced by like genre film. And, like I love David Lynch. I love experimental film and stuff too. But like, I've always like really felt like I could do it. I could be like just like a genre filmmaker. But when we had the controversy at TIFF, I had a lot of pressure on me to just kind of put the movie out there. And I could never articulate to people why it was important to me to not do that and to hold out. It wasn't just like financial. It really was. I mean, maybe it's ego thing, but it's also just like I've been doing this long enough to know like the movie was going to always find its audience, but there needed to kind of be a plan in place so that like I could actually put it towards having a career the career that I've wanted my whole life. You know, like I think it's ridiculous that we live in a culture now where every artist, even the ones like me who have had a trade in this industry, like in an industry, like that we have to really carve our own path in online spaces or on Twitter or YouTube or whatever. It just keeps us all in cycles of poverty. It like I fucking hate posting to Twitter. I do it still just because it's the easiest way to get the word out. But every single time I send a tweet, I'm like, this sucks. Like I'm supporting one of the worst people alive right now just by still using this site. Somebody who hates me and people like me so much that he literally won't talk to his own child. Yeah, like I really just wanted to kick the door down for myself and hopefully for some people that come after me. And, you know, I really don't want to be the type of filmmaker and the type of queer filmmaker who like holds the ladder up behind them. Like, it's not even that I have integrity. It's just that like this movie is that to me. This movie is such like it's a gospel on how we need to be making art more ethically and more for ourselves and from a place of care. And that's just I want to hopefully change my little corner of the industry as much as I can toward that.
I mean, it definitely feels like we're getting more and more people are embracing this idea of independent queer cinema. And more people are deciding instead of putting whatever short film they want on YouTube, try to do a festival circuit. Totally. And that was one of the things that I think I really respected after what happened at TIFF. What I really respected at your like insistence to like, no, like we're going to find a distributor. Like we're not just going to throw it up online and call it a day. It's not just going to be like a fan film. It's like, this is an actual like expressive piece that it might mean that you won't see it for another 2 years. Yeah. But it shows like a level of like actual artistic commitment that I found gave the project a real sense of like weight.
Oh, thank you.
The notion of this comfortable YouTube bubble we've created is perhaps why I find the public access TV side of Ella Yerman's Late Stage Live so compelling. A lot of queer people around my age grew up with the transgender video essay as the primary form of our artistic video output. And there's a lot of good video essays out there, but at a certain point, it started to feel like the main way a young radical queer person could engage with the art form. It's gotten to feel so insular and a bit restrictive, like we're enforcing our own bubble. On top of this self-limiting aspect, I'm not even sure how much growth the format even has anymore. Recently, I've begun to see more queer artists specifically trying to make things outside the strict video essay framework. Even some of the most popular trans video essay creators have been trying to move into documentary and narrative filmmaking. I asked Ella about moving beyond the video essay bubble, because although Late Stage Live does air on YouTube as well as Brooklyn Public Access, the format is not just your average transgender video essay.
We don't have any pink lighting at all. Yeah, it's definitely something I've been thinking about a lot, both like in my own personal career and for the show. A lot of my bylines in the last few years are all YouTube based with Late Stage and Some More News. And it's frustrating that even as YouTube has seen so much growth and like celebrities come from YouTube all the time, and some of the biggest names in the world are internet stars now, there's still like the sense of illegitimacy to be doing a project on YouTube. And like when I try and get published in like more legitimate journalism magazines every so often, I'm always looking at my resume and being like, I wish I had like a byline in a magazine instead of 3 years of writing for a YouTube show that I love so much and think is doing better work than most of these magazines, but like that I know won't get treated the same. So there's definitely an aspect to that I think, yeah, like it's partly YouTube is so accessible. Anyone can post on YouTube that I understand why queer people have sort of relegated themselves to this bubble. Trans people have like why we've ended up with like, you know, the trans video essay scene. Thank you, Mother Natalie. But it makes it hard to sort of break into this like final frontier of legitimacy, I think. And I think by like, yeah, like not fully committing ourselves to being a YouTube show from the get-go. We do sort of leave doors open to be considered like a more legitimate television production, which is exciting for like growth opportunities. I think the live studio audience also really pushes us out of that zone. We get a lot of accusations from people who are mean on the internet of using a laugh track. And I just want to say, and I will say it till the day I die, it would be so much easier if we were.
No, I could totally tell when there's gay people laughing in the background versus a laugh track. It's a very clear difference.
Absolutely. It would be so easy if I was just plugging that in post. But no, we bring in 30, 35 gays every month just to laugh at my jokes. And sometimes they don't. And you can see that too when they don't laugh at my jokes. But I think that is something I was really excited to do that is different from a lot of the other video essay sphere, because it also like brings in aspects of live performance that I love as a stand-up and as a theater artist. And also like, just pulls it into like a slightly different genre of thing that we're making. And I think certainly in terms of like growth and audience building and like the potential of being picked up by some larger organization, it definitely puts us in like it makes us look slightly different than like a YouTube show, even if we can all like sort of quietly acknowledge like, well, but all of our growth is happening on YouTube and Instagram. But like, as you said, like Real Late Night is huge on YouTube now too. And there's all these other extra correlating factors of like monetization on YouTube sort of died a few years ago after the ad apocalypse or whatever. And so you have to go through crowdfunding sources like Patreon or sponsorships or like there's not like, you can't
Nebula or whatever new streaming service for YouTube pops up. Yeah.
Right. You can't just rely on AdSense anymore. And that's frustrating in its own degree. But I think even beyond that, like not relegating ourselves to being a YouTube show, both thematically and like concretely in terms of content and form, is like really exciting. And I think like even as we grow and gain a budget and are able to buy nicer cameras, we want to like keep the aesthetics and vibe of like edgy radical public access, because it's like a part of the voice of the show along with sort of the practicalities.
Yeah, having background ketamine jokes, I think, really is what sets you apart.
The quote unquote VHS cleaner that sits on the desk every episode. I don't own a VHS.
We will return to It Could Happen Here after these messages. We now return to It Could Happen Here. To me, the most exciting thing about the idea of a new wave of independent trans cinema is that we'll get to see a whole bunch of trans films that otherwise would never get made by the big studios. After trans filmmaker Jane Schonbrun's successful festival run of her small-scale feature debut titled We're All Going to the World's Fair back in 2021, her next film, called I Saw the TV Glow, got picked up by Emma Stone's production company and A24. The film is now coming out later this month. In the case of The People's Joker, it dares to take Warner Brothers and Disney at their word that their privately owned intellectual property is in fact our culture's version of mythology, our very own Greek gods. And so if these characters really are the cultural icons that the monopolized companies who own them claim them to be, what happens when we actually do treat them like mythology and use these characters to artistically mythologize our own lives? By skillfully sidestepping copyright law via effective legal parody, we get to have a Batman film through the lens of transgender chaos magic, which I'm afraid would simply never happen under Warner Brothers Discovery, as they can't even stop deleting their own finished films to get tax write-offs. A few weeks ago, I showed my It Could Happen Here co-host Mia Wong, The People's Joker, and afterwards we talked about what makes it feel so special and its place within the pantheon of queer cinema.
One of my dear friends, Vicky Osterweil, is writing a book called The Extended Universe about sort of copyright law and what it's done to film, and specifically focusing on Disney. And the thing that's different about The People's Joker, right? If you want to know why The People's Joker is, why specifically you couldn't make this, it's partially because it's trans, and it's partially because it's actually a movie.
Yes.
Because and this is Vicky's argument, and this is the hidden truth about the film industry, is that movies are not designed to sell movies.
No, they're designed to extend copyright.
No, it's worse than that. Like, a superhero movie does not make money on the movie, right? The movie theater is not making money on the movie. The movie theater is making money on food. The company itself That's not where the money comes from. The money comes from toy sales.
Yeah.
And sales of stuff afterwards, right? So what you're actually seeing when you're seeing a superhero movie is just an ad.
An advertisement for products.
And this is part of what the People's Joker is that makes it different, right? And and it's because like specifically because it is trans and because of the way that it's trans, this makes it impossible for it to be made by a corporation. And because trans people fought to make it, it gets to be an actual movie and not a fucking toy sales thing.
Yeah, because they're not going to be making a toy of mustache pedophile Batman.
Yeah, right. And this is incredibly important for the genre of film because, there is a world that is not too far off where we are the last people making actual fucking films and not advertisements.
Yeah.
To use the sort of like only semi-ironically using the sort of lofty like Marxist language. It's like, yeah, like we kind of also have been given the historical task of saving film from its complete annihilation by these fucking capitalist copyright ghouls.
It's a pleasure to see. It's a joy to see. I was reading an interesting article recently that talked about how trans media's orientation has been very referential. It's been very much based on experiences that trans people have as kids engaging with media, whether that's with something like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, whether that's with DC Comics. And it's because transness is so much about recontextualizing your whole life and identity, a lot of trans media has also been about this form of recontextualization. Both with, I think, The People's Joker is a great example. Also, the upcoming film, I Saw the TV Glow, which is very much based on like Buffy and other kind of like Monster of the Week style TV shows. It's combining all of that kind of stuff with a lot of Lynchian influences, both in these cases, both in The People's Joker and in I Saw the TV Glow, to create this like fever dream of self-identity in this referential format. And that's been an interesting trend to watch in trans cinema. Yeah. And I think that's something to look. I think that's something to look for when you're engaging with future trans cinema projects, seeing if those kind of things pop up. And if they don't, why is that? What else is actually happening instead? Yep. I think those are going to be some interesting ways to engage with our own DIY art in the next decade here. Because as much as like everything we talk about is so like depressing, like on this show, like about how everything dealing with like trans stuff is about how everyone's trying to like kill us and restrict our medical care, that does not actually stop us from becoming people who actually engage with culture in any real sense. I think despite everything that's targeted against trans people, it does not stop us from actually having a cultural output. And the thing a lot of conservatives are afraid of is our cultural output. The fact that trans people keep being actually really compelling artists and really compelling people in general makes conservatives nervous. I don't think it's impossible for conservatives to make art. I think there is conservative art that actually can be seen as like okay art. But they certainly are afraid at how good trans people are at making music and now making movies. When I was talking with Mia, she brought up a good point that I'll paraphrase here. Part of why we're seeing this new wave of independent trans cinema is the result of a combination of two things. One is that trans and queer artists have been and continue to be chewed up and spat out by the traditional media machine. And two, the traditional media machine itself is slowly rotting from the inside, which can be a tricky situation to navigate for a lot of queer artists, but simultaneously it also means that we're in this position where, having been spat out, we have full reign to go make our own massive, grotesque, degenerate queer art on our own, because there simply is no artistic alternative. Trans people need to be submitting to film festivals, regardless of whether or not cis viewers and critics will understand the work. Filmmaking is one of those art forms that you can't really do all by yourself, but that doesn't need to be a limitation. That can be an asset. Gay people are good at a lot of different things, and filmmaking integrates so many different artistic areas and skills. And as we've seen, a movie made by a community of queers can create such a unique result. When talking with Vera Drew, she mentioned that having a whole team of artists help her complete the movie is also in part what ensured that she would find a way for the film to be distributed the right way, so that it's seen up on the big screen and not just published online for free.
That was another thing that really kind of kept me from doing anything irrational with the film, like posting it on Google Drive with contribution, like a donation link or whatever. It was like, Like, I have all these artists that just worked on this movie with me for 2.5 years, and like, no, we're gonna fucking do this. Like, I said I would do this, and I'm gonna do this, because like, I can't just like feed this back into the incubator and the fucking feedback loop of trans Twitter and like cool underground circles that I totally love to be a part of, but we're all trying to, you know, get more visibility outside of those things. So yeah, I always really just wanted to honor the team and make everybody feel valued. And, you know, I paid as many people as I could and, you know, was very straightforward about what I could afford. And a lot of people worked in ways that they just felt compensated, and that was very appreciated. You know, I think in general, like, everybody on this was very underpaid, but like, it was such a labor of love and such like a personal thing for all of us, that everybody just like showed up and really rallied around each other and really just kept saying yes and to everything. And it's so cool. I don't know how I'll ever really be able to replicate. I don't think I should either, just because it was quite a gargantuan task. But you know, it was literally the best time of my life was making this movie. Like, I think it taught me just how to be a human being and how to love and how to like finally feel connected to my queer community. Because I think like The People's Joker is really, more than anything, it's really about nuance and like relationships and family and politics, and it talks about nuance by really leaning into these like extremes, which I think just is also inherently queer. And I don't know, I mean, that to me is like another thing. It's just like I hope, and there's a lot of trans filmmakers that are like starting to pop up in the genre space, but like I hope we see more of it, just because like we all grew up on the same movies that cis people did, so like why can't we make similar art, you know, and tell our stories in the process, and also do it in a way that's like not hiding in the shadows.
The People's Joker is slowly ending its US theatrical run, but you can still look for tickets and showtimes at thepeoplesjoker.com, and you can find Vera Drew online at veradrew22. Late Stage Live just released their 6th episode, and I'm really excited to see how the show will grow and evolve over time.
And we've actually recently hit an inflection point with the show where like the sort of organic haphazard growth is no longer sustainable for us. We've been having a lot of really exciting and scary conversations behind the scenes about like formalizing our production process and kicking our shit up a notch so that we have the potential to make this bigger and better and more polished. But it is at its core still like a production born out of community and like mutual respect. I'm Ella Yerman. You can find me on Instagram at ella.yerman, on x.com at Ella Yerman. I think I'm on Blue Sky also, though I don't do anything there. You can find Late Stage Live as Late Stage Live on all platforms. That's Instagram, X, YouTube, TikTok, probably also Blue Sky, but those are the big ones. And then if you're interested in finding my stand-up show, we're at T4T Comedy on Instagram and X. Oh, and then most specifically, if you're interested in helping fund Late Stage and make us bigger and better and shinier, you can go to patreon.com/latestagelive, where we post, we have a behind the scenes photos and videos, and we make a semi-frequent podcast where my head writer and I talk about the news and shoot the shit and talk about the process in a lot more detail, episode by episode. And we're so grateful for our current patrons and for opportunities like this. And we're excited to see where the show goes.
That does it for us at It Could Happen Here. I hope you enjoyed my Transformers and G.I. Joe ad break references. And if not, you can send any complaints to the president of Columbia University. Solidarity to everyone across the country who's been out the past few weeks. See you on the other side.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. 100. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Flag football is exploding, and iFlag is leading the way. As the Guinness World Record holder, iFlag hosts premier flag football tournaments nationwide for boys, girls, high school girls, and adults. From first-time players to elite competitors, iFlag delivers top-level competition, unforgettable experiences, and a community built around the game. Ready to be part of it? Join the movement. Find your tournament and learn more at iflag.org. That's iflag.org.
This is Bethany Frankel from Just Be with Bethany Frankel. Most dog food is marketing, not nutrition. That is why Biggie and Smalls eat just food for dogs, real 100% human-grade food with ingredients I actually recognize. And yes, I do see the difference. Better digestion, healthier skin, more energy, dogs that feel better, my babies. If you've been on the fence about switching, stop overthinking it. What's more important than your furry babies and their health? Go to justfoodfordogs.com right now and get 50% off your first box. No code needed. Just try it.
Welcome to It Could Happen Here, a podcast that is, I don't know. I'm gonna speak for the rest of my hosts who aren't here, so they can't stop me and say that this is a podcast normally opposed to brunch. I'm your host, Mia Wong, and today we are talking about something that we kind of haven't been we haven't covered as much as I think we should have, which is unionization in small businesses. We've talked a lot about unionization in sort of larger things. We've talked about sort of mid-sized chains. But today we're talking about the unionization of a place called Fried Egg I'm in Love in Portland, which it's if you sort of imagine the platonic ideal of what do you think a place called Fried Egg I'm in Love is going to be like, it is in fact that. And with me to talk about this is Sol and Janie from the Fried Egg Workers Union. Yeah, both of you, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. Partially, you know, I mean, as we sort of discussed a little bit, because I want to get into a bit later the specific dynamics of sort of small business union stuff. But first things first, I wanted to sort of talk about what actually, you know, how did you all decide to unionize? Because I think this is a bit different story than the kind of thing we usually get on this show.
Absolutely. Well, I've been at this particular restaurant since 2019, and It's been something that's come up every now and then. Mm-hmm. I think we're just a very queer workplace. We're a very leftist workplace, and we tend to have a lot of common ideals. And I feel like what makes our unionization effort unique, or maybe not unique, but just different than a lot of like, we need to start a union right now kind of efforts, is there wasn't a thing that caused it. We were all, like me and 5 other people were just sitting around a table and decided, hey, we should just start a union. And so we kind of looked into what that looks like, and the snowball started rolling downhill.
Yeah, and this is something I think is really interesting because, you know, I mean, one of the things you get really commonly in sort of like anti-union propaganda, you see this. Like so a lot of my family were engineers, right? And engineers do this all the time where they're like, oh, we don't need a union. We're like happy. We're well paid. Everything's great. And then, you know, you look at what happens to them and it's like, oh, well, now you have Boeing, right? It's like, well, you all never organized. You no longer have any power and your planes are like falling from the sky. So yeah, this is I'm taking my soapbox moment to be like, you two out there, even if your job is good, at some point it's going to not be, and you should unionize first before they, I don't know, like be Google and decide that don't be evil actually constrains them from making money and decide to be evil. So get out ahead of them before.
Couldn't agree more.
Absolutely. This has felt very, very proactive. I haven't been there nearly as long as some of my comrades, but the general like consensus is that like things are pretty good. So instead of letting things go bad, let's make major steps to protect what we have. Especially as like you kind of notice how this small business is slowly starting to operate like not a small business.
Mm-hmm. And we had one of our food carts was upgraded to a brick and mortar at the beginning of this year, and pretty much in that moment that started operating as a real restaurant, things really clearly, I think, started setting in that like this is a bigger operation than it used to be, and the owner very much still has the intention of making it as good of a place to work as he can, which is to be appreciated. But it's also understandable that as things start to grow, it's a lot better if it's a collaborative process in terms of making it the best place to work that it can be. And I think getting a seat at the table is something that we have to make for ourselves, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a threat or a retaliation.
This is something I think is kind of important with unionizing, especially places that are kind of, like, or, where even where the sort of the boss is legitimately trying to like do the right thing, which like is kind of true of like my work, right? Like, like the people above my bosses are kind of a fiasco, but like my immediate like bosses are like, it's Robert and Sophie, right? Like they're pretty chill. But like one of the dynamics that sets in is like, it's not what the actual conditions are isn't necessarily always going to be under their control, even if, even if they want to do the right thing. And the demands of things like scale and, the demands of sort of market competition have this sort of disciplining effect on what, what your working conditions can be if you're going to sort of compete with like, I don't know, your like donut shop that like tortures its union workers, right?
For example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Purely abstract.
Purely abstract. Yeah, absolutely. Seeing a shop of, 12 become, 2 shops, a food cart and a commissary kitchen of 35, that definitely, it's just pushing the business in a direction very naturally. It feels very much like a part of how systems work. Even if your owner has really good intentions, just the nature of like how capitalism works is starts to change things as at scale for sure.
Yeah, and that gets into something else that I'm sort of interested in, how the sort of unionizing process went, because this is a very, I guess going from 12 to 35 is a big increase in the number of people, but that's still a very small shop. So can you talk a bit about what it's been like kind of organizing organizing a number of people that you can very easily fit into a room?
It's been interesting, and it's been exciting in that way because we are able to cram into a room and the energy is very palpable. And so like inspiring momentum to get shit done in each other has been really, really wonderful in that way. But I think also it makes it easy for us to be very tactical with how we are handling this process, where we're making sure that at all 4 locations, there's a majority, if not a unanimous approval and support and membership in the union. And the more that I'm meeting union organizers and union reps and people from IWW, the more that I'm realizing we're in a situation where we can establish some really lovely precedent for similar workplaces who want to start a union, who are about the same size as us, or even like neighbors in our like on the streets that our locations are at, where we can do things like there's not enough precedent in the IWW for service industry in general, but particularly it's very common to be in the negotiating process. And one of the things that will be offered to the employer in exchange for whatever you're negotiating on is like a no strike clause. Like, okay, we'll give this to you of like, we're just not going to be able to strike for the duration of our contract. And so in exchange, we can get some other stuff that we're asking for. But because we have such a strong majority, and in all 4 locations, we have a strong majority, I think we're currently planning on keeping the right to strike.
Hell yeah.
And, we're not planning on it. I hope that we don't ever have to do that. But just having that as precedent, I think, will help our community and other similar unions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, this is something that going back to, if you look at the sort of heyday of American unionism, if you look at like the 50s, 60s, 70s, like those contracts didn't have no strike clauses in them. Some of them did. So sometimes it was like a federal thing. But the thing about no strike clauses is that it makes, we've talked about this a bit before on the show, but one of the sort of issues when you have a union is like, okay, so even if you get a contract, right, and that usually takes a long time, takes a lot of fighting, the company is immediately going to start trying to violate the contract. And so, your contract is only as strong as your ability to enforce it. And, a really, really good way to enforce it is by being able to go on strike. But normally, people aren't organized enough to actually fight their employers on it. And so it just ends up being a kind of standard part of contracts. And yeah, it's really exciting that y'all are committing to fight for that from the beginning, because it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. The more I learn about how unions operate, the more I'm realizing that, it doesn't necessarily stop people from getting fired. It doesn't necessarily stop people from having, injustice happen upon them, but it just gives you the ability to fight in the first place. And I think a lot of employers who are facing a workplace who are wanting to unionize, recognizing that it's not like a threat. It's not like, okay, we're going to have this union and everyone's going to go on strike the next day and our business is going to tank. But they're just asking for the right to have a better negotiating seat.
Yeah, this is something I actually think is really interesting about this campaign, where there's this really kind of, I don't know. I think if you're able to build a precedent of being able to negotiate a contract that doesn't have a no strike clause that allows you to go on strike whenever you want, is something that is characteristic of an incredibly militant shop. But I think if you can actually get the precedent of having companies treat this as normal, because it's something that should be normal, right? Like this is how a lot of the US used to work, right? It used to be, if you were on an auto line, assembly line, there'd be a guy in the back with a whistle. And if a contract violation happened, or if the company's asking you to do something that you aren't, that you're not contractually obligated to do, the person would, the union person would blow the whistle, immediate strike, the entire assembly line goes down. And, it turns out you actually can run a completely functional economy like this. But the kind of the mentality of the people who own businesses right now is that you should never at any point let your workers do anything at all. You should immediately fight them at the moment they try to unionize. And I think, having a precedent of of being able to get this kind of stuff without immediately having to launch immediately kick off a series of strikes with your employer is a good one to set.
That we have so many people that are super interested in being a part of this organizing effort because we all like being there. I think is huge in comparison to lots of stories that we hear about. And really wanting to bring that to the restaurant industry, because that's unions are criminally under-recognized within service work.
Yeah.
And arguably an industry that needs it the most.
Yep. Well, and that's the other exciting thing about this shop is that, you were talking about sort of like there not being enough service organizing with the IWW. And that's true of like basically all unions and especially shops at your scale, because, a lot of these unions are using like a very kind of crude cost benefit analysis. And their assessment is like, well, why should we bother to organize like this shop that has 35 people at it? Because, this is going to like, we're like the amount of dues money we're going to get out of it is like not, is not worth the effort. But on the other hand, like, do you know how many workers there are? Like, how many of these tiny shops there are across the entire country that if everyone just refuses to organize them, then you're leaving like tens of millions of workers just sort of like screwed.
Yeah. I can't speak for all IWW, but I know like talking with like the Portland branch, it definitely mirrors our shop and at like how queer and leftist it is.
Yeah.
And it's not surprising that they working with the IWW or with the Coalition of Independent Unions, which is a Pacific Northwest like union for unions kind of thing. It's not surprising that like our values are aligned, and it's like making for something like really fun and like setting a new kind of industry standard for service industry.
Yeah. Unfortunately, speaking of industry standards, I have to go to an ad break. It's in my contract somewhere, probably, although I don't think my employers have read my contract in a long time. But, such are the dictates of a podcast that your senior bosses don't listen to. Yeah, we will return in however long the ads are. And we are back. So, okay, another thing that I kind of wanted to talk about is what has it sort of been like in terms of like, so like how has, in a shop that's like this small, how has the sort of like organizing conversations gone, right? Like, is everyone just sort of close enough that, you were able to kind of do this organically, or was there still sort of a like mapping process for all of the shops, or?
Well, luckily it has gone pretty smoothly, but we were advised early on to create an interest map where we go through the list of every coworker that we have and talk about like, how well do we know them? Do we think they would be down? Like, well, this person would obviously be down. This person, I guess we'll just have to talk to him and see. And apart from a few cases, it has been very successful and easy so far. It's really lucky that almost all of our coworkers are comrades.
Yeah, I think like our first like conversation was, I think, about 10 people at like a bar close to like the main Hawthorne shop. And like once we had like that get together, it really became about like, how do we get our satellite locations, on the same page, with like a super majority at one shop, then just moving on to, our little, the Pioneer Food Cart, and then our commissary kitchen, and then the Mississippi location that was just, hiring a whole new staff for, and, getting them in, collecting them into the fold. And IWW was very helpful in like how to like kind of create those processes to like ensure that, we were approaching people in the right way, and, getting a proper head count.
Yeah, that can be a disaster.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Like my union, we're still trying to hash out whether some people are in the union or not. And like people will leave the company. And this happens all the time, right? Like one of the things you discover really quickly when you do union organizing is that your like management doesn't actually know how anything works, or like even who's working for them and what they do. They have absolutely no idea. And so you have to do their job and figure out what everyone does.
What management would be so mad at you for saying such blasphemy.
Look, if they didn't want me to talk negatively about them, they should pay me more. they simply do not pay any of us enough.
That's a universal rule
from time to time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that, what's interesting about this shop too is it really seems like y'all just sort of speed ran doing a good campaign. Like you're doing all of the things that you get from good organizers, but then, every once in a while you just get a shop where it just kind of everything just clicks and goes.
It has been 5 months start to finish, which I feel like is significantly faster than most. Yeah. And most of that is just down to that there aren't very many of us. And so talking to everyone hasn't been that crazy of an endeavor.
Yeah.
But I think probably in the first meeting or two, we just crunched the numbers and realized, okay, we're not going to have any trouble having a majority. But we have to, and so the focus of our work went into making sure we do it right and learning to inoculate people and talk to people we haven't talked to yet and people for whom it would be a little more sensitive or more like in-depth conversation and educating ourselves on what starting a union actually looks like. And IWW has been very helpful providing these little trainings that I've been able to go to. It's funny that they're on Sunday afternoons, and so I'm pretty sure I'm the only person at our brunch restaurant who doesn't work Sunday afternoons. So I've been going to those. But
yeah, this is something that like I don't know. I feel like it should be a thing that. So I was at this will I guess will have come out after the Labor Notice episode that I'm doing, but something that I feel like I don't hear much discussion of in union organizing that I feel like there should be is like fighting management on scheduling and like trying to fight for, people actually A, having consistent schedules and B, not just having like, I don't know. Like I know a lot of people who find out their schedule on Facebook like 4 hours before they have to go in, right? Like that's insane. That is not a way for an industrial process to function, right?
No. Thankfully that has not been one of our issues. At least not systemically at Friday.
Yeah, but it does make it hard to do intro organizational trainings because it's like everyone has weird scheduling stuff going on. So it's hard to like, I don't know. I feel like it's an underrated barrier to getting a lot of people from different unions to work together is that no one is ever off at the same time.
That's real. Yeah.
Absolutely. I know it's been weird. I think there a huge aspect of our success, I think, is that we have been able to like, I think the unique part about the breakfast place is that it's not open from, AM to PM. It's not open from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. like a restaurant could potentially be open. We are open for breakfast. We're done at 2 on the weekdays, and adding in a standing union meeting at 4 p.m. once a week was very easy to add to everybody's schedule. I think, and the nature of the breakfast place lent to that working very, very easily.
Yeah.
And our coworkers that maybe need a little more persuasion that like, hey, no, don't worry. This is really happening and you can be a part of it. Even if you know that they're pro-union, kind of getting the ball rolling with people sometimes takes a meeting or two. And being able to have the peer pressure of like, hey, we're going to a meeting right now. I know you're not doing anything after this and I'll give you a ride. Helps a lot because then they go to their meeting and they're like, wow, that was awesome. I never knew I could take control of my life in any way.
Yeah. That rules. There really is nothing like just being in a place with a bunch of people who all are trying to like actually do the thing. Like, I mean, and I think this is why, like as we're recording this, like a bunch of campus occupations are going, right? And I mean, I don't know, God, hopefully by the time this comes out, they won't have all died horribly because this is getting recorded on what day is it? The April 28th. So inshallah,
ideally,
and inshallah, this isn't being released into like hell world. But yeah, you know, I mean, I think one of the aspects of those camps is that like you're just there with a bunch of people who you get to talk to and organize with, and it turns out that actually being there face to face with a bunch of people is just great. And that's the thing. That's the thing you can also like that. You know, as much as like union work can be work, right? Like it can be you sitting in front of a spreadsheet and going, "Oh my God, why won't this person respond?" Like it's also, I don't know. It's also like could be really great, and I don't know. You dear listener, should experience it because it rules.
I couldn't recommend it more. It is the best feeling in the world, and Sol and I are addicted to it. To feel like you're actually doing anything real.
Hell yeah.
It's incredible.
That's something we heard from our IWW friends is that like this, like especially with how early in the process we are, like how exciting that is to like just get everybody in a room and feel like we're all working towards the same thing.
Yeah.
And that you do get addicted to it. And that's often where the union organizers came from, was like starting their own. And they're like, oh, I need to keep doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a pretty good note to end on, unless you do have anything else that you want to make sure we get to first.
Yeah. With like how early in the process we are, like after this comes out, like we will have like dropped our authorization cards and like actually started like the formal process. Like we're still pretty early on, but we already have a fundraiser set up with like a local beer bar we're at, Workerstat.
Hell yeah.
And that's super exciting. And we're building our socials and probably have a GoFundMe for strike fundraiser. So yeah, early days, but very exciting, very purposeful days.
It's going to be a big week.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Where can people go to find the union and go to support you all?
Well, our socials are not live yet, but
all right. So yeah, this is being recorded before things go live. We will have the links down there.
I think we're settling on the username fried egg WU, which we are saying foo-woo about because you gotta make this fun. But yes, we will be sharing that with you.
I'm glad you knew, because I wasn't sure if we had a handle agreed upon yet. But yeah, find us on the socials, Fried Egg WU.
With it being early days and like us not even being public yet, I've built those accounts, but they're not ready to go. So there's that like we're in this dead zone period where we built the infrastructure for the proper election, even though we are very hopeful that our owner will recognize us with the majority that we have. But yeah, we're our 0 day is May Day, a couple of days from now, and we are very excited for that.
Very much so.
Hell yeah. Hopefully it goes well. It will be in the past by the time this comes out, but good luck to both of you, and thank you both so much for coming on.
Oh, the pleasure belongs to us. We're both fans.
Thanks so much,
thank you for having us on.
Yeah. And yeah, this has been It Could Happen Here. You too can go experience the joys of organizing your workplace. So go do that, or go to a student occupation, or do both. I don't know. There's a lot going on. There are many places for you to experience the joy of organizing with other people. So go do that. And yeah, you can find us in the usual places. I don't know. Sophie will probably be on in about 1 second in this ad pivot. Not ad pivot. Whatever. This has gone completely off the rails. I have not had enough sleep. Goodbye.
No sleep for organizing.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Flag football is exploding, and iFlag is leading the way. As the Guinness World Record holder, iFlag hosts premier flag football tournaments nationwide for boys, girls, high school girls, and adults. From first-time players to elite competitors, iFlag delivers top-level competition, unforgettable experiences, and a community built around the game. Ready to be part of it? Join the movement. Find your tournament and learn more at iflag.org. That's iflag.org.
This is Bethany Frankel from Just Be with Bethany Frankel. Let me be blunt. Most dog food is junk. It just is. And I'm not feeding junk to Biggie and Smalls. That is why they eat Just Food for Dogs. It's real, 100% human-grade food with ingredients I actually recognize, not mystery pellets pretending to be healthy. And once I switched, the difference was obvious. Better digestion, better skin, more energy, dogs who actually feel good instead of just surviving dinner. Here's the thing. You care about quality. You make an intentional choice to be healthy. So why are you gambling with your dog's health? So let's think about our furry babies. Go to justfoodfordogs.com right now and get 50% off your first box. No code, just try it. Because once you see the difference, you're not going back.
Welcome to It Could Happen Here. I'm Andrew Sage of the YouTube channel Andrism, and I'm here with
James. Yeah, it's me and Andrew again.
Yes, once again. So I recently dropped a video on states, or more pointedly, a video that sought to define the state and its functions, synthesize its critique by anarchists, and basically understand the ways that states fail both society and nature, so that we can let go of status inevitability and think outside of it to realize the freedom and power of all the people. Most people aren't anarchists, unfortunately. But I've noticed that generally speaking, some folks are more receptive to anarchist ideas and others just seem to shut down without engaging with it earnestly or meaningfully. You get a mix of those reactions in my comments, though overwhelmingly toward the receptive side because, that's the kind of intellectual curiosity I try to attract in my space. But the more hostile reactions had me thinking about a book that I read many years ago and did a video on years after that was called The Authoritarians by Bob Altemeyer. So I want to take another look at the ideas in that book because even though Altemeyer doesn't land at any truly radical conclusions, his scholarship, in my opinion, gets us closer to understanding the psychology of both authoritarian followers and authoritarian leaders. Also, rest in peace, I found out that he died when I was preparing this just this year in February. But that aside, we'll be talking about the former first, and that is what's up with authoritarian followers. Let's get into it. First, we need some context. So in the wake of World War II, social scientists sought an explanation for the evils perpetuated by the Nazi government during the war. Theodore W. Adorno, Els Frenkel Brunswick, Daniel Levinson, and Nevitt Sanford published The Authoritarian Personality in 1950, proposing a personality type for the fascist follower ranked on an F scale. They particularly concentrated on prejudice within the psychoanalytic and psychosocial frameworks of Freudian and Frommian theories. Their work was highly critiqued, but it was also highly influential in laying the groundwork for our understanding of authoritarian personalities. In the aftermath of Adorno and Company's book, social scientists would continue to tweak, develop, and expand our understanding of authoritarian psychology. Most notably, the concept would be refined by Bob Altemeyer. A Canadian-American psychology professor proposed the right-wing authoritarian personality in 1981. After numerous studies, Altmaier presented his findings in his free book, The Authoritarians, in 2006. I had to clarify, though, right-wing here is not being used in the context of the political spectrum, which is a concept that deserves its own scrutiny. In this context, Altmaier uses the word right in the sense of the Old English writ, an adjective for lawful and proper. Altmaier defines authoritarianism as, quote, something authoritarian followers and authoritarian leaders cook up between themselves. It happens when the followers submit too much to the leaders, trust them too much, and give them too much leeway to do whatever they want, which often is something undemocratic, tyrannical, and brutal, unquote. I find this definition of authoritarianism lacking, but I'm an anarchist, so of course I would. To me, if authority is defined as the recognized right above others in a social relationship to give commands, make decisions, and enforce obedience, then I would define authoritarianism as a matter of degree to which you uphold the principle of authority. I think many people are at least authoritarian light because that's the status quo, unfortunately. But more specifically, I think the people we call authoritarians are those which are especially invested in the enforcement or advocacy of strict obedience to authority at the expense of freedom and plurality. So right-wing authoritarian followers, or RWAs, are those which overwhelmingly support the established authorities in their society, like government officials, arms of the state, and traditional religious leaders. In North America and elsewhere, RWAs tend to be, or rather I should say high RWAs, because the RWA thing is a scale, but the high RWAs tend to be political conservatives. However, that doesn't mean the authoritarian personality is exclusive to conservatives, nor is it exclusive to North America. But the scale is definitely tailored to a North American and English-speaking audience, lending to its documented issues with translating to other regions, but with effort, I could definitely see it being adapted to other cultural contexts as well. And as Altmaier argues, the concept of the right-wing authoritarian could equally apply to a society where the established authorities claim to be representing the left. So, what defines the right-wing authoritarian personality, psychologically speaking? They feature three primary traits or attitudes. For one, a high degree of submission to authorities who are perceived to be established and legitimate in the society in which one lives. Two, a general aggressiveness directed against various persons that is perceived to be sanctioned by established authorities. And three, a high degree of adherence to the social conventions that are perceived to be endorsed by society and its established authorities. These traits are measured with the right-wing authoritarianism scale, or RWA scale for short. It's readily accessible online, so I'm not going to go through the entire scale point by point, but it basically includes a mixed series of statements that folks can indicate their level of agreement or disagreement with. Statements like, our country will be great if we honor the ways of our forefathers, do what the authorities tell us to do, and get rid of the rotten apples who are ruining everything. Or, what our country really needs is a strong, determined leader who will crush evil and take us back to our true path. And just to mix things up, a woman's place should be wherever she wants to be. The days when women were submissive to their husbands and social conventions belong strictly in the past. As you could imagine, the degree to which you agree or disagree with these statements would place you somewhere along the scale. The lowest total possible score on Altmaier's version of the test would be 20, and the highest 180. But most people will hit either extreme. A sample of 1,000 Americans in 2005 found that the average score was 90. Technically speaking, high RWAs are just people who score higher than the average population, so it's really a relative term. Also, another disclaimer, in the context of psychological studies, personality tests can definitely make mistakes about individuals. So it's not a diagnostic tool for individuals to determine if they'd make a good stormtrooper. However, the scale can reliably identify levels of authoritarianism in groups. Also keep in mind that stuff like the interpretation of wording and foreknowledge of what the test is trying to measure can definitely influence results. Still, this tool has been used for most of Altmaier's research on authoritarianism, so it's good to be familiar with it. So now you may be wondering, how well does the RWA scale's measurement of submission, aggression, and conventionalism map onto people's reality? So for submission, high RWAs tend to believe that people should submit to authority in almost all circumstances. So they put a lot of trust in the law and the authorities. Maybe not all authorities in every single circumstance, but they definitely bought into the concept itself. They're the types who trusted Nixon during and even after the Watergate crisis, likely the ones in Germany in 1945 who refused to believe that Hitler was responsible for the Holocaust, the type to rabidly support anti-terrorist initiatives, no matter how invasive. Throughout his research, Altmaier found that high RWAs are far more likely to tolerate police burglaries, drug raids without warrants, police crackdowns on peaceful protests, subversion via agents provocateurs, and so on. As far as they're concerned, Father knows best. Their favorite authorities are above the law. But like I said, they don't always submit. Their blind support can be trumped by other concerns, but most times they're not big fans of holding officials accountable for their actions. They really don't care if a cop kills someone in broad daylight or someone drives through a crowd of protesters on the street. In terms of aggression, high RWAs aggress when they believe right and might are on their side. Right meaning their hostility is authority approved, might meaning they have a physical, tactical, or numerical advantage over their target. They don't fight fair. And just like they go easy on authorities who commit crimes, they go easy on anyone who attacks people they're prejudiced against. But they definitely don't go easy on the people they hate. They seek to sentence criminals to longer terms than average, and they're some of the loudest supporters of capital punishment. And if they hate one group, bet your bottom dollar they probably hate other groups too. You could call them equal opportunity bigots. Chances are if they hate immigrants or trans people, those are not going to be the only targets of their ire. Their prejudice has more to do with their own personality than their target's actual attributes. Still, they don't always aggress when they think the proper authorities approve, just like they don't always submit. There are always more factors at play in any given situation, including a fear of counter-aggression or consequences that may halt their hostilities. Regarding conventionalism, higher WAs believe that everyone should live by the norms that their authorities have decreed. Multiculturalism, plurality, diversity, those things clash with what they consider correct and what they consider wrong. They usually get their ideas from fundamentalist religions, so you'll find that higher WAs are strong advocates for the traditional family structure, with patriarchal husbands, submissive wives, and obedient children. They're also far more likely to support their government's patriotic version of various historical narratives. Most interestingly, their conventionalism even influences their response to the high RWA test itself. If they were told the average response for a statement on the test, they were far more likely to adjust their answers to the mean than most. When asked what they would like their own RWA score to be, low RWAs said they would like to be low RWAs. Middle RWAs said they'd like to be low RWAs. But high RWAs said they want to be middles, not lows or highs. Why? Because they tend to rank being normal very highly in values tests. Also, just because they want to be normal doesn't mean they don't want to be richer or smarter than others. Nor does it mean they're necessarily going to drop their prejudices. They may get tugged slightly, like with the somewhat decrease in prejudice against gay people after the legalization of gay marriage. But their normal is often a measure of what's normal in their in-group. So if it's still normal in their in-group to be violently homophobic, more than likely they will still be violently homophobic.
The conformity is the value rather than specific bigotry or what have you.
Yeah.
Talking of conformity, Andrew, we have to conform to the needs of sponsors of this show right now. And we're back.
So Altmaier has been lightly critiqued for rendering RWA as the dominant psychological account of authoritarianism. Of course, it makes sense that RWA has been the focus, considering that the study of authoritarian personality was born out of post-World War II studies of fascists. Right-wing authoritarians often favor established, absolutist forms of government and weaponize the presently dominating hierarchy to facilitate said absolutism. But there are authoritarians who also favor absolutist forms of government, with slight differences, believing that the presently dominating hierarchy should be overthrown and replaced with their own. These have potentially been called left-wing authoritarians. Even though the right and right-wing authoritarian didn't have anything to do with the political spectrum, let's keep pushing. In Chapter 9 of The Authoritarian Spectre, Altmaier conceptualizes left-wing authoritarianism, or LWA, as also composed of submission, aggression, and conventionalism. So essentially, LWA is a subcategory of RWAs. He's also quick to point out that not all leftists are LWAs, but as he describes them, LWAs are revolutionaries who, 1, submit to movement leaders who must be obeyed, aka submission, 2, have enemies who must be ruined, from capitalists to counter-revolutionaries, aka aggression, and 3, have rules and party discipline that must be followed, aka conventionalism. In essence, authoritarianism is psychological. RWAs support the established authorities, LWAs oppose them in favor of their own, but the underlying dispositional core is still authoritarianism. But the focus is on RWAs in general here. Considering these traits, submission, aggression, conventionalism, it's clear that people with right-wing authoritarian personalities are rather dangerous. They find it easier to bully, harass, punish, maim, torture, eliminate, and exterminate their victims than most people do. They're more willing to join mobs and militias, more likely to blame victims for their misfortune, and more likely to condemn common criminals to long, brutal sentences in jail. They seem to have a lot of hostility boiling away inside them that their authorities can easily unleash. So we have to ask, what causes this? Why are they like this? According to Albert Bandura's social learning theory of aggression, aggression occurs after 2 conditions are met. Firstly, some feelings like anger or envy need to stir up hostility. Secondly, inhibitions or contextual restraints against releasing that hostility would have to be overcome. Only then can the aggression erupt and flow. So let's discuss the instigator and releaser of authoritarian aggression. High RWAs are highly motivated by fear. They have an extra dose of fear response in their genes, more than most people. They probably learn to be fearful from their parents about all kinds of things, radicals, atheists, kidnappers, queer people, etc., etc. They grew up in a scarier world than most, which is probably why they tend to score so highly on the dangerous world scale. That scale, like previous scales, provides statements and measures levels of agreement or disagreement with stuff like, quote, if our society keeps degenerating the way it has been lately, it's liable to collapse like a rotten log and everything will be chaos. And, quote, any day now, chaos and anarchy could erupt around us. All the signs are pointing to it. End quote. Everything, to them, is a sign of the times, a perversion corrupting society. In peaceful times and in generally dangerous ones, higher WAs feel threatened. But what releases that aggressive impulse to act? Altmaier found more than anything else, self-righteousness. Of course, almost everyone thinks they're a bit more moral than average, but higher WAs, they tend to think they're the holy ones, the chosen, the righteous. That empowers them to isolate, segregate, humiliate, persecute, harass, beat, and kill. That self-righteousness, combined with their high scores on the dangerous world scale, is what empowers their prejudice, their heavy-handedness, their mean-spiritedness, and their eagerness to crusade against the other. So, how do high RWAs become high RWAs? Are they born that way? Possibly. Do their parents make them that way? Somewhat, but not completely. You see, no one's a complete carbon copy of their parents. So what determines a person's position on the RWA scale? Experience. Our life experiences teach us lessons that our parents and peers may not. Our experiences with authorities shape our perception of authority. Especially when someone hits adolescence, they tend to chafe against authority, even if they submitted to authority as children. Those hormonal urges, desires for autonomy, and new experiences could shake up their early lessons completely. Experiences could either end up reinforcing the authority's teachings or contradicting them entirely. Naturally, it's easier for kids from authoritarian homes to remain authoritarian and vice versa, but ultimately, experiences do most of the shaping. Middle RWAs have some mix of experiences and upbringing that keeps them in the middle. When it comes to higher WAs, their experiences were probably very controlled. Authoritarian followers usually live in a homogeneous bubble of patriotic, traditional people, an echo chamber apart from the evils of the world, safely kept on a short leash for most of their lives. But there's hope yet. Othmai's research has shown that high RWAs can change if they have some important life experiences. That's why university can be such a game changer for people. It's just meeting new people, leaving that small, enclosed world and developing relationships with people of different walks of life. And that makes a big difference. There are a couple traits that make high RWAs such good followers for would-be dictators. In short, those traits are illogical thinking, highly compartmentalized minds, double standards, hypocrisy, a lack of self-awareness, ethnocentrism, dogmatism. In long, well, consider this syllogism. All fish live in the sea. Sharks live in the sea. Therefore, sharks are fish. Logically speaking, the conclusion doesn't follow. Even if sharks are fish, and they are, the premises do support the conclusion. But if higher WAs were asked if the reasoning was correct, they were more likely than most to say that it was. When asked why, they'd answer, because sharks are fish. In essence, because they agreed with the conclusion, they assumed the reasoning was right. That simple test shows that if authoritarian followers like the conclusion, the logic involved is fairly irrelevant. Reasoning is what should justify the conclusion, but as far as they're concerned, the conclusion validates the reasoning. Of course, let me not overstate. A lot of people have trouble with syllogistic reasoning. Higher WAs just happen to be slightly more likely to make such mistakes. But higher WAs generally have more trouble than most people do realizing a conclusion is false. They have a harder time determining whether empirical evidence proves or doesn't prove something. They more easily fill gaps in science with supernatural forces. And they have trouble being critical of anything unless they've already gotten their talking points from their authorities. Regarding the highly compartmentalized minds, we all have some inconsistencies in our thinking, but their minds just be like oil and water. One second they're saying free speech, next they're saying ban critical race theory. One moment they're talking about individual freedom, and next they're basically throating the boot of the state. They don't merge files in their brain to really see what fits. They tend to just pick up whatever their demagogues are saying. And if your mind is such a mess of contradictions, you're going to end up with a lot of double standards, easily justified by whatever idea you hold that's most convenient in the moment. Principles are really irrelevant. Keep in mind the excuses they make for those in power and how hard they are on victims. Classic example is the difference between how they treat a prisoner who beats up another prisoner versus a police officer who beats up a prisoner. Lower WAs usually don't have such stark double standards. When it comes to hypocrisy, I'm going to keep using this example because, it's still somewhat topical. Critical race theory. As much as authoritarians accuse the left of being anti-free speech, politically correct types, RWAs are far more likely to report a desire to censor ideas they don't like. This is also because they tend to lack basic self-awareness. If presented with a list of things right-wing authoritarians are likely to do, like be prejudiced, conformist, etc., and then ask how true it is of themselves compared to most other people, they really have no idea how different they actually are. And that's partially because of the bubble they tend to exist in. Us versus them is a very hard line in the sand for authoritarians. Humans as a whole do have a tendency sometimes to fall into tribal patterns of thinking, but authoritarians see the world far more sharply in terms of their in-groups and out-groups than most. We do tend to associate with people who agree with us on many issues, but authoritarians really do stick to their bubble of validation and ethnocentric reinforcement. That's why they don't realize how prejudiced or aggressive or submissive they are compared to most people. By avoiding challenges to their beliefs and holding fast to their authorities, they remain stuck in a circular logic of I'm right because the people I agree with say I'm right. Finally, in terms of dogmatism, higher WAs hold to unchangeable, unjustified certainty, righteousness beyond a shadow of a doubt. They're more likely than most people to agree with statements like, the things I believe in are so completely true I could never doubt them, and there are no discoveries or facts that could possibly make me change my mind about the things that matter most in life. I am absolutely certain that my ideas about the fundamental issues in life are correct. Meanwhile, they're more likely than most people to disagree with statements like, it's best to be open to all possibilities and ready to reevaluate all your beliefs, and flexibility is a real virtue in thinking, since you may very well be wrong. When you receive or absorb rather than contemplate your beliefs, you have no basis upon which to determine whether or not they're true. So you avoid challenges by staying in the bubble as much as possible. And when that can't be avoided, trotting out whatever talking points you got from wherever. And if that dialogue tree fails, you could always fall back on your group's assurance that you are right. Now you could challenge your beliefs, or you could insist you're right and retreat. What option do you think higher WAs tend to choose?
Yeah, double down.
Exactly. Dogmatism is by far the best fallback defense, but it's also the most blatant dead giveaway that the person doesn't know why they believe what they believe. Alas, higher WAs are only one side of the authoritarian coin. They're nothing without their leaders. So next time, we'll be talking about those leaders, those social dominators. Until then, all power to all the people. Peace.
Cheers, Andrew.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Flag football is exploding, and iFlag is leading the way. As the Guinness World Record holder, iFlag hosts premier flag football tournaments nationwide for boys, girls, high school girls, and adults. From first-time players to elite competitors, iFlag delivers top-level competition, unforgettable experiences, and a community built around the game. Ready to be part of it? Join the movement. Find your tournament and learn more at iflag.org. That's iflag.org.
This is Bethany Frankel from Just Be with Bethany Frankel. Most dog food is marketing, not nutrition. That is why Biggie and Smalls eat just food for dogs, real 100% human-grade food with ingredients I actually recognize. And yes, I do see the difference. Better digestion, healthier skin, more energy, dogs that feel better, my babies. If you've been on the fence about switching, stop overthinking it. What's more important than your furry babies and their health? Go to justfoodfordogs.com right now and get 50% off your first box. No code needed. Just try it.
Welcome to It Could Happen Here. I'm Andrew Sage of the YouTube channel Andrewism. Once again, I'm joined by
James, and we're back again. I'm excited to learn more about authoritarian leaders this time, right?
Yes, last time we discussed the mind of the authoritarian follower, thanks to the research of the late Bob Altemeyer. You should definitely listen to the previous episode, but in summary, we looked at his concept of right-wing authoritarianism, which refers to a personality type that features three primary traits or attitudes. First is a high degree of submission to authorities who are perceived to be established and legitimate in the societies in which one lives. The second is a general aggressiveness directed against various persons that is perceived to be sanctioned by established authorities. And the third is a high degree of adherence to the social conventions that are perceived to be endorsed by society and its established authorities. We also speculated the roots of authoritarian aggression and looked at the mind of the authoritarian follower, which demonstrates traits such as illogical thinking, highly compartmentalized minds, double standards, hypocrisy, a lack of self-awareness, ethnocentrism, and dogmatism. Today, as promised, we're looking at the other side of the coin. We're looking at the leaders, but also what we can do to address both followers and leaders. So let's begin. In 1994, social psychologists Felicia Prato and Jim Sidanius presented the Social Dominance Orientation Test as a measure of belief in social inequality. Social dominators agreed with statements like, quote, "This country would be better off if we cared less about how equal all people are," and, quote, "Some people are just more worthy than others," while disagreeing with statements like, quote, "If people were treated more equally, we would have fewer problems in this country." Fellow social psychologist Sam McFarlane took their test and 21 others, including the RWA scale, to determine which would be the best predictor of prejudice. His research found that only 2 of those tests, the social dominance orientation and the RWA, could do the job well. But the thing is though, while both tests were able to identify prejudiced people, they were identifying different types of prejudiced people with very little overlap. Social dominators and high RWAs, authoritarians of 2 flavors. They have some things in common though, besides prejudice. They tend to support the same political parties. They tend to have shared economic philosophies, usually conservative on both counts. But they also have some huge differences, starting with a desire for power. Altmaier conducted 2 surveys with students that included the question, how much power, as in the ability to make adults do what you want, do you want to have when you're 40 years old? In this sense, Altmaier is using power in the sense of authority, as I would define it. The recognized right above others in a social relationship to give commands, make decisions, and enforce obedience. So the scale went from 0, meaning they don't care for it, to 5, meaning their goal is to have a great deal of authority. Social dominators consistently wanted to have much more power than most people did. Authoritarian followers did not. Now, obviously, people often want authority for different reasons, some more self-righteous than others. But social dominators take thrill in authority in and of itself. Doesn't matter what the cause is, as long as they can control others in the process. There's another scale Altmaier uses, the power mad scale. On it, social dominators agree with statements like, it's a mistake to interfere with the law of the jungle. Some people were meant to dominate others. And do you enjoy taking charge of things and making people do things your way? They also disagree with statements like, life is not governed by the survival of the fittest, and we should let compassion and moral laws be our guide. Social dominators have some of the highest scores on this scale, and high scorers tend to be intimidating, ruthless, and vengeful, with no care for nobility or charity. They despise empathy and have a dog-eat-dog mentality toward the world. They love the power to hurt in their drive to the top. High RWAs just don't have that drive. And while authoritarian followers might highly value group cohesiveness and loyalty, social dominators don't. Because like I keep saying, they're in it for themselves, for their power, and they will betray their own group if push comes to shove. Another area where social dominators and higher RWAs diverge is when it comes to religiousness. Authoritarian followers are usually religious fundamentalists, while dominators don't tend to be that involved. Some of them do go to church regularly, but that's for manipulative reasons. Because social dominators could lie. They lie a lot. All they have to do is pretend to be religious and say the right words, and boom, they get through the higher WAs. Reminds me of a certain politician.
I'm just going to say, this is putting me in mind of like Donald Trump tear gassing a massive crowd of people so he can walk to a church and then take photos outside and not go in.
Yeah.
Good times.
There's another scale we could take a look at, and that's the exploitative, manipulative, amoral dishonesty, or exploitative mad scale. Unlike higher WAs, social dominators' anonymous responses indicate that they agree with statements like, there's really no such thing as right and wrong. It all boils down to what you can get away with. And there's a sucker born every minute, and smart people learn how to take advantage of them. Social dominators disagree with statements like, it gains a person nothing if he uses deceit and treachery to get power and riches. And All in all, it is better to be humble and honest than important and dishonest. In essence, social dominators admit to striving to manipulate, to being dishonest, to being immoral and treacherous. They see their followers as suckers, fools to be controlled. But what else makes them different? Well, we could go back to the roots of hostility. Social dominators actually show greater prejudice against minorities and women than higher WAs do. But their followers are much more hostile towards LGBTQ people. Why? Well, it ties back to the religiousness point and the higher WA respect for the law. Since attacks against minorities are less clearly supported by religious and civic authorities as they used to be, authoritarian follower aggression towards these groups, both overt or sneaky, had to be curbed a little bit. Meanwhile, social dominators are hostile because they already live in the apocalyptic jungle that higher WAs fear, and they are the apex predator. They don't score highly in the dangerous world scale because they're not scared. They're the ones ready to weaponize that fear. Dominance is their first priority. For everyone they meet, they need a reason to not try to control them. They don't care too much about the law either. It's just about not getting caught. They're not as self-righteous as higher WAs because they're quite immoral. And higher WAs aggress when they believe right and might are on their side. Social dominators aggress because might makes right for them personally. Higher WAs hate crime out of fear and self-righteousness in the name of authority. Social dominators hate crime out of sheer desire to intimidate and control. Lastly, we need to look at the differences in their thought process. Social dominators, for the most part, don't have a web of contradictions, weak reasoning skills, compartmentalized thinking, or gullibility that define higher WA's mental life. They're not particularly dogmatic or zealous about any particular cause or creed. They just want authority. They say whatever they need to say to get ahead because they have no consistent values. They'll be hypocrites like higher WAs, but they're probably aware of and fine with their own hypocrisy. For example, they're cool with wealth inheritance and corruption. They're opposed to welfare. They're unconcerned with income inequality or voter disenfranchisement. They're apathetic to racial inequality and injustice. They believe that people should have to earn their place in society, and they don't care if most of them can't. They still talk about how the only way to have a level playing field is to get rid of things like affirmative action. And part of what defines social dominators is their utter disregard for equality. So we have to ask again, what causes this? Why are they like this? And well, social scientists just aren't sure yet. If we look at the life-shaping experiences of social dominators, they would probably report that deceit and cheating were good tactics because it led to what they wanted. Taking advantage of suckers felt great. They enjoyed having power and having people afraid of them. Life boiled down to what you could get away with, and of course, the experiences led them to believe that life is a jungle. Dominators were probably rewarded early in their lives when they cheated, took advantage of people, weaponized fear, overpowered others, or got away with something wrong. Whether or not their parents gave them that outlook on the world, because of the psychological law of effect, they simply learned that being amoral, unsympathetic, and exploitative worked well for them. So what happens when higher WAs and social dominators work together? In this field of research, the lethal union refers to the combination of happily subservient higher WAs with social dominators who share their values in the driver's seat, eager to dominate and control. A death spiral union that develops all the time in the real world. As Altmaier aptly described, quote, "True, sufficiently skilled social dominators served by dedicated followers can make the trains run on time, but you have to worry about what the trains may be hauling when dominators call the shots and the higher WAs do the shooting." End quote. While most social dominators get fairly low scores on RWA tests and vice versa, a very, very small percentage of people in Altmaier's samples scored highly on both RWA and social dominance tests. These are the double highs. If prejudice was a sport in the Olympics, higher WAs would get bronze, social dominators would get silver, and double highs would definitely get gold. Now, you might be wondering, how do they manage to score so highly on both tests if social dominators and higher WAs have so many differences? How can somebody be a submissive dominator? So there are a couple of reasons why a wannabe dictator would score highly on both tests. One is because some RWA scale statements are open to interpretation. Take the statement, quote, "Our country desperately needs a mighty leader who will do what has to be done to destroy the radical new ways and sinfulness that are ruining us," end quote. A follower would be like, "Yes, please." And a dominator would be like, "Here I am. Behold, I am your leader." Double highs still score highly on all the power scales like other social dominators and unlike other higher WAs. Secondly, double highs are the religious among the social dominators. So they respond to the religious items on the RWA scale that other social dominators don't, thereby significantly raising their RWA score. I don't think I need to go into too much detail. I feel like I should be absolutely clear that double highs suck. Whatever the issue, they probably are on the wrong side of it. The worst of the worst, prejudiced, power-hungry, exploitative, mad, religiously fundamentalist, dogmatic, dangerous, worldist, a noxious stew of the worst of both social dominators and higher WAs. Regular social dominators might end up in charge of PTAs, HOAs, workplaces, local governments, and other personal kingdoms. Not all of them succeed in life due to the animosity they create, the obstacles they might face, or their lack of intelligence, attractiveness, or network to gain the kind of power they want. And some of them might even get caught in their lies and illegalities and don't have the capital to get out of it. But you see double highs? They tend to have a head start. While regular social dominators have to fake their religiousness to get the support of higher WAs, double highs can more easily get started in their own churches, already part of the in-group, sharing their prejudices, economic philosophies, and political leanings. Even if they are faking it a little bit, a double high already knows all the code words, dog whistles, and Bible verses they need to get ahead. They know what stance they should hold about evolution, the role of women, abortion, school prayer, censorship, law and order, etc., etc. Double highs run the show, you dig?
Yeah, for sure.
So now what? Knowing that social dominators do whatever they can to hold on to power, and higher WAs are extremely resistant to change, how do we deal with a situation where social change requires dealing with these people? I mean, you can't debate them. Even if you were to intellectually wrestle with a double high leader and utterly destroy them with facts and logic, their higher WA audience is not likely to change their minds. Trying to change highly dogmatic, evidence-immune, ethnocentric people is an exercise in frustration and futility. It's also hard to fight the sheer fear-mongering power of the likes of Fox News and Facebook, to combat the class and religious roots of ethnocentrism, and to reduce the self-righteousness of their followers. It's even harder to convince them that they are being systematically misinformed and played for fools by their leaders. Even if they listened to these episodes or watched my videos or read Altemeyer's books, they would either get defensive or, honestly, because a lot of them aren't self-aware, assume that this is about someone else, finding a way to compartmentalize, misinterpret, rationalize, and dogmatically deny anything I've said so far. So, what to do? First and foremost, representation matters. It's important that higher WAs see more of the breadth and diversity of human existence and experience. Their reality is skewed, and the visibility and representation of people from other backgrounds, not just in media but also in their personal lives, is very important. One thing studies have shown is that higher WAs who know a gay person are far less likely to be homophobic than their fellow higher WAs. And the best exposure to different types of people is through access to higher education, or more broadly, just any space with diversity. College may not necessarily turn them into committed revolutionaries, contrary to popular belief, but the environment of higher education has a tremendously beneficial impact on higher WAs. 4 years of undergrad experience can knock their scores down by 15 to 20%. Academic spaces need to be alive, vibrant, and most of all, accessible. And we need people in academic and non-academic spaces to embrace the power of influence. I don't mean this in a give them an authoritarian to follow kind of way. I'm not talking about like becoming a club president or ordering people around. I'm not thinking about hierarchical leadership, but rather the natural influence of individuals who model exemplary behavior and provide an example for others to look to. People who freely lend their talents and knowledge and mentorship to others. In a conformity experiment in Harvard in the late 1940s, real subjects were surrounded by actors who deliberately gave obviously wrong answers to questions. Usually, the subjects went along with the wrong majority at least some of the time. But if, in another condition of the experiment, one other person gave the right answer, real subjects were much more likely to do the right thing, even though it meant joining a distinct minority rather than the majority. So I'm saying that as the people who hold radical beliefs, it's important to stand up. You don't have to form a majority to have an effect. 2 or 3 people speaking out can sometimes change the decisions of entire school boards, church boards, or other institutions. Obviously, reform is not going to be enough, but we do need to present some opposition on that front in that sphere. Lack of opposition teaches dominators to keep dominating. And it only takes one person to start the opposition, with a domino effect that could potentially influence even higher WAs. Because at the end of the day, it's clear that they want to be quote-unquote normal. In their bubbles, in their echo chambers, they don't really realize how extreme they are. They need to be exposed to the perspectives and experiences of people outside their tight circles. Mutual aid and other organizing efforts can show them the humanity of other people, finding common ground in common cause. But ultimately, in my view, the best long-term solutions require youth liberation and prefiguration. We need youth liberation both at home and at school and everywhere else. As long as we continue to reinforce the notion that children need to blindly submit to authorities, as long as we refuse to grant them humanity and autonomy, we will continue to be without humanity and autonomy. We will continue to have adults generation after generation who do not know how to resist authority. We must prefigure those relationships in our personal lives and our social spaces. Or we must prefigure our liberation. It's not enough to just campaign against social dominators. We have to dismantle the systems that allow them to dominate in the first place. The only way to keep social dominators from seizing power is to prefigure a system where no one person can so easily coerce and dominate. To quote Bob Altmaier one last time, we cannot secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity if we sit with our oars out of the water. If we drift mindlessly, circumstances can sweep us to disaster. Our societies presently produce millions of highly authoritarian personalities as a matter of course, enough to stage the Nuremberg rallies over and over and over again. Turning a blind eye to this could someday point guns at all of our heads, and the fingers on the triggers will belong to right-wing authoritarians. We ignore this at our peril. Social dominators want you complacent, apathetic, hopeless, and out of the way. They want to control everything and everybody, and they have their loyal followers ready to mobilize. They are not the majority, but they're determined to win. Do not let them. If you know what's happening, if you spot these signs in your own spaces, it's your responsibility to do something about it, to organize, to educate. Because one person could accomplish so much, and 2 people could accomplish so much more. Good luck. All power to all the people, because it could happen here. You can follow me on patreon.com/SaintDrew. This has been Andrew Sage, Andrewism. It could happen here. All that jazz. Peace.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Flag football is exploding, and iFlag is leading the way. As the Guinness World Record holder, iFlag hosts premier flag football tournaments nationwide for boys, girls, high school girls, and adults. From first-time players to elite competitors, iFlag delivers top-level competition, unforgettable experiences, and a community built around the game. Ready to be part of it? Join the movement. Find your tournament and learn more at iflag.org. That's iflag.org.
This is Bethany Frankel from Just Be with Bethany Frankel. Most dog food is marketing, not nutrition. That is why Biggie and Smalls eat just food for dogs, real 100% human-grade food with ingredients I actually recognize. And yes, I do see the difference. Better digestion, healthier skin, more energy, dogs that feel better, my babies. If you've been on the fence about switching, stop overthinking it. What's more important than your furry babies and their health? Go to justfoodfordogs.com right now and get 50% off your first box. No code needed. Just try it.
Welcome back to It Could Happen Here, a podcast about it happening here. And, you know, when we talk about, like, collapse, things falling apart, there's very few case studies that are more important for folks to be aware of than what has happened and is continuing to happen in northeast Syria, in a region of the world known as Rojava, or the autonomous regions of northeast Syria. And I'm here with James Stout. He and I have both reported from the Rojavan Project, and we are talking again with Arthur and Debbie Bookchin about what's going on there now, as the struggle continues, so to speak.
That's right. Thank you very much for joining us, Arthur and Debbie. And you're both here in your capacity as representatives of the Emergency Committee for Rojava, right?
That's right. And thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming back.
So I think perhaps we should begin by explaining what ECR is and does. I've been very fortunate to be asked to speak at one of your meetings, so I'm familiar, but I think maybe some of our listeners wouldn't be. So could you begin with explaining what it is, what it does?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Emergency Committee for Rojava is kind of the only standing U.S.-based organization focused on solidarity with the Rojava revolution. And what we do is we try to build a grassroots solidarity movement with the revolution in northeast Syria, with the Kurdish freedom movement more broadly. And we do that in a few different ways. One is like just trying to inform the public, right? So kind of public education. Another is advocacy, trying to sort of put pressure on the United States government to stop arming people who are trying to kill everybody in Rojava and to support the people instead. But another thing that we do is try to build kind of movement-to-movement relationships, like finding social movements in the United States that we think share a lot of affinity with the movement over there, try to put them in touch and try to kind of facilitate dialogue.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's important to kind of start, as we often do, with the attempt to get the U.S. government to stop arming folks killing the people there, which in this case refers specifically to the Turkish military. I mean, we're all kind of dealing with, in a separate part of the world, how difficult it is to stop the United States government from arming people.
Ain't that right?
Yeah.
That's a great point, Robert. You know, I think sometimes it's hard for people to even comprehend just the massive flow of weapons from the United States to Turkey.
Yeah.
I mean, over the years, it's just, I think in the last 15 years alone, the U.S. has sold Turkey something like $4 billion worth of Patriot missiles alone, and then billions or at least millions in Chinook helicopters, the Cobra attack helicopters. There is just a huge flow of arms from the United States to Turkey. And as Arthur said, one of the things that we really do try and do at ECR is to get people not only aware, but also into doing some advocacy on that. And one of the things that we're also trying to prevent right now is the sale of any more F-16s to Turkey, which, as I'm sure your listeners know, are used in the bombing of people in Rojava and also in Turkey and in northern Iraq. So that's a very critical issue, in fact.
Yeah, and it's a critical issue in part because, what we're seeing is I would describe it as a pretty concentrated attempt to destroy civil society in Rojava, right? Like you're
absolutely
not just through the use of airstrikes, through things like blocking off access to water, but the F-16s that Turkey purchases from the United States and the continuing armaments to keep those things flying and firing missiles are a huge part of how they're able to continue degrading the capacity of the self-administration to maintain civil society.
Exactly. I mean, there is really their aim to completely destabilize the society, to shake confidence in the autonomous administration, to break morale, to engage in psychological terror, and frankly, also to do physical harm. As I'm sure you know, and your listeners know, Turkey very effectively uses drones and other methods to take out leadership, particularly female leadership, women who are leaders of the movement. And, there's not a day that goes by, really, that doesn't include strikes from Turkey into Rojava. I mean, I'm just thinking, the Manbij Military Council just has reported in the last couple of days that the state of Turkey has shelled various villages in Manbij, that Kurdish neighborhoods in Aleppo are really subjected to continuous embargoes by the Damascus government, but also, Turkey intercedes to prevent supplies from getting to these places. So it's really, I think there's something like more than 200 bombings by Turkey in Iraqi Kurdistan, even since just the beginning of the year. So it's really ongoing assault.
No, absolutely. I think, for people who are less familiar with it, it's easy to kind of get bogged down in the weeds because all the details, they change every day. But I think the broad strokes are pretty clear and they haven't changed for a long time. I mean, Turkey sees this revolution, rightly so, as a threat to its own power, to its own ideology. The idea that local communities would govern themselves pluralistically through autonomy is a direct threat to the idea of the Turkish state, which is basically a fascist nation state. And they kind of have a twofold strategy. I think you could see it this way, right? So, for those who don't know, Turkey has already invaded northeast Syria multiple times. It's invaded Afrin in 2018, Serikaniye, Tel Abyad in 2019, and it occupies that territory still to this day. But when it's been unable to seize more territory directly, it kind of has this twofold strategy where the other side of the coin is to just do everything possible to make life unlivable, right? So that's where the assassinations come in. That's where the sort of information warfare, blocking of water, sort of economic embargo. The basic idea is just to spread fear, to spread uncertainty into every sphere of life. And like you said, Robert, to basically attack civil society itself.
Yeah. I wonder if you could explain, I think our listeners are maybe familiar with the campaign against civil society and civilian targets that we saw in October, November of last year. That I saw some of while I was there. But Turkey's recently launched a spring offensive, right? Which doesn't isn't exclusively and limited to bombing, but also contains like I guess combined arms, infantry bombing. Can you explain what's happening there and what the sort of, I think the plan you've sort of very well summed up already, right, which is to make life unlivable for the Kurdish freedom movement. But can you explain what's been happening in the last few weeks for people who haven't caught up?
So for people to understand the connection in the first place, right, it's important to understand that really, while there are distinct organizations which are autonomous and are place-based within the Kurdish movement, right? They have their own parties and self-defense forces in Syria and in Iraq and other parts of Kurdistan. It's important to see it also as kind of one big Kurdish freedom movement in another sense, and in an important sense because Turkey sees it in that light. So for the same reasons that Turkey wants to crush the revolution in northeast Syria, Turkey wants to crush the PKK. The Kurdistan Workers' Party, right? And the guerrillas of the PKK are based in northern Iraq. And time again, they've tried to sort of dislodge the guerrilla forces from the mountains, but it's pretty hard to do. This is NATO's second largest military, and they still, after decades, have not been able to crush this insurgency. And so what we're seeing in recent weeks is not necessarily so novel. I mean, you can get into the weeds about the region of Metina and a particular road that they're trying to seize for logistics on their way to the mountain of Gara. But the truth is, they're trying to crush the movement where it is, and they're seizing an opportunity. There's often like a weather window for the fighting in the mountains as well. And so when the snow starts to melt in the spring, you start to see an escalation of the fighting in the mountains, which often winds down in the fall again. But it's yet to be seen how this is going to go. I mean, y'all have, I don't have to tell you, right? Like, you've done some recent episodes on technological developments with the movement, and Turkey's been having a really hard time making gains on the ground.
And also, I mean, as Megan Baudet noted on this podcast recently, the Turkish leader Erdogan tends to take out any insult he feels he's suffered, and particularly election setbacks, as happened in the local elections at the end of March, on the Kurdish regions everywhere in Turkey, Iraq, Syria. And so we're seeing also crackdowns, as has happened also for quite some time, but on journalists, again, sort of cranking up again. It's funny that on World Press Day, which was May 3rd, a Kurdish journalist was arrested, strip searched, a woman thrown in jail. And this is, another sort of wave of politicians being arrested. Just again on Monday, I think 13 politicians were sentenced to 6 years plus in jail, in prison. So this sort of policy that seems to show itself every time Erdogan feels a bit threatened is one that we're seeing right now, in part, I think, as a result of those election defeats that his party suffered. Yeah, absolutely. And sinister as it is, whenever they lose in the mountains, they often hit harder in northeast Syria and vice versa. So it's all just a big kind of ugly game that they're playing. Yeah.
Well, I want to get to some more here, but first we've got to take a quick break. We're going to throw to some ads, and then we'll come back and continue this discussion. All right, we're back, and I'm trying to get a sense of how the situation is on the ground right now, despite considering the challenges of the attacks on infrastructure that have continued to go on. Like, what are we looking at from a daily life point of view in places like Kamishlo?
Well, one of the things that I think is important to emphasize is just how strong a lot of the civil structures really are, even in the face of these attacks by Turkey. And I'm sure Arthur will have something to say about that, and also about maybe some of the sort of the military side of this. But, the extraordinary thing about Rojava is just how deeply engaged they are on the civil level. In our group at the Emergency Committee for Rojava, we're in contact with a lot of people in civil society. And I'm always amazed at how many sort of requests we get for exchanges of information and scholars, and they're building the university there to do more and more technical things, whether computers or agricultural sciences or, just a vast variety, a graduate program they want to do right now in social ecology that I've been working with them on. And so even though there's this effort by Turkey to kind of terrorize the civilian population, and I'm sure, people can imagine what it must feel like to have drones flying constantly overhead and wondering if you get into a car, whether you might, be the subject of a drone attack. Nonetheless, there is still this extraordinary sort of hopefulness and also energy towards building the society. And for example, one of the things that they recently did, and it took a long time, but they rewrote their social contract, which is what we would think of as a constitution, to empower women even more, to empower various ethnic minorities more, and to make it a document that is truly inclusive in terms of how it was written and how it will be implemented. And so on the ground, I think even though they are suffering in a lot of ways, and they are, because, Rojava is also a region that is subject to terrible environmental dislocations because of global warming, there's still a huge sort of excitement, I think, about the fact that they are self-governing and the fact that they are empowering women, and those kinds of activities, especially on the part of the women's movement, Congress Star, just continue to go on. They've built an alternative justice system. They are increasingly turning their sort of economy as much as is feasible, and it's a slow process, but into more of a cooperative economy. So all of those things are very much underway there. And education is a huge part of that.
No, I mean, that's also true. It really is. But just to speak to kind of the other side of that, Robert asked sort of what is life like, say, in a place like Qamishli right now? I think in some ways it's a lot like it was when I was in a place called Zirgan, which is another frontline city, where at the same time, Debbie's describing, life goes on, people are trying to build up civil society, they're trying to organize the communes and the cooperatives. At the same time, there's a tremendous fear and uncertainty. Fear in an immediate sense around these drone strikes. I mean, you guys have been there too, right? Like I've been home, I think 11 months now, and I still, every time I hear a small airplane, my body just, even if my brain knows that it's just a plane, like my body's convinced it's a Turkish drone. And imagine, you live your whole life in a place like that, or you've spent the last 10 years. So a lot of people are living in this constant state of fear and uncertainty, even on a practical level. Say you're a farmer, and you're going to plant your seeds this year. Do you know that you're even going to have your land in a month or 6 months? People are taking Turkey's threat of an invasion seriously. It hasn't happened again since 2019, but I can tell you, I talk to people there almost every day, and they're taking it extremely seriously. So there's kind of this idea of an impending invasion sort of hangs like a cloud over daily life in so many ways. And on top of all of that, of course, since I left Northeast Syria, there was this major wave of attacks against civilian infrastructure right around the time you were there last, James, and you can probably speak to it more, but I mean, we're talking about power stations and oil wells and hospitals and schools and food storage facilities. So they're still really reeling from these infrastructure attacks.
Cutting off electricity to 1 million people at a time, and water supplies.
Which is about a third of the population of the region.
Yeah, I mean, war crimes. There's no other word for it. That's what they're called. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very jarring experience, like at least in my time there, which is much briefer than the amount of time both of you have spent there, to like go out in the daytime and talk to people and see this incredible optimism for like, we are building a different world. And like, it's there and you can see it and we're moving towards it. It's not like, we're building a different world when we have encampments on campus too, but this is a tangible societal project.
Yeah. Well, and that it speaks to, that's why the attacks Turkey is carrying out take the form they're taking, right? Because
absolutely.
the priority, the primary strength of the self-administration is not in its arms. It's in its ability to provide a functional civil society that people are motivated to take part in, which is why their primary weapon is to try to destroy the ability of people to live.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it feels like. Like, my experience, although brief, we lost electricity every night. People are not willing, or people are less willing to go out and drive long distances after dark. There is very clearly damage to the infrastructure. I was in a couple of different places. One of them was having issues getting water pumped. There are massive funerals, right, for people who have been killed, and you get to see this. What is a beautiful spectacle in a sense, but also like, you can't spend a week in Rojava and not see a little baby say goodbye to their dad, or just a dead baby, that's terrible, And like the one thing that I noticed, which I think people might not have picked up on just through sort of consuming media, the presence of people who are martyrs, as they call them, right? Shaheed. It's everywhere. Like from the first place I stepped foot across the river, there were these portraits, these yellow and green portraits on roundabouts in cities, in people's homes. Like the scale of the sacrifice, both to build this project and to defeat ISIS, I think is very hard. I mean, the United States has been at war for most of our lives, but it has nowhere near the same impact on our day-to-day lives as it has had there.
Yeah.
That's so true.
There's not a family really in Rojava. When you spend some time there and you meet with different people, there's not a single family that hasn't lost somebody. I mean, it's 13,000 people in the fight against ISIS alone. And now, and not to mention, for example, the 200,000 people who were displaced when Turkey's, jihadi militias invaded Afrin, the westernmost region. So it's absolutely a fact of everyday life.
Yeah, every time I spend a lot of time volunteering at the border, as people listening know, and every time we meet Kurdish people, often, they're from like northern Kurdistan, right, which is in Turkey, under the control of the Turkish state, I guess. Even like the volunteers who are not super briefed out on Rojava, who are just people who want to help, like everyone knows what it means when you talk to people and they have the little green picture or the little yellow picture on their phone. Which is it's a profound part of the lived experience of being part of the Kurdish freedom movement, or just existing as a Kurdish person in that area, and that's it's really hard to grasp the scale of that.
No, it's so true. I mean, it just makes me think that it's kind of related to this larger sort of spirit of sacrifice that's part of what the movement calls like a revolutionary personality. In a lot of ways, the families of what they call the martyrs, they also see it as their sacrifice. It's their contribution to the movement. And it's easy for, I think, Westerners to kind of, dismiss it or get really uncomfortable with it. We're not familiar with that on a cultural level as much. But I think it's a mistake to see it that way. I think there's something incredibly profound about it that has to do with the way that people really identify their whole lives, the meaning of their lives, with the revolution, with the movement, that is the purpose of their lives, that is the purpose of the life of their families, and come what may. That's something that, movements here can't really relate to in the same way yet, I think.
Yeah. And I kind of want to talk a little bit more about that. We're gonna throw one last time to ads, and then we'll come back and kind of flesh out this discussion. And we're back talking about like what it means to be part of a revolution, as opposed to someone who has revolutionary sympathies, which it's easy to be. And we have a lot of those in the United States. I'm going to guess most of the people listening to this show have at least some of those, right? Whether or not you think there's any realistic chance of seeing that during your own life.
Yeah.
It's a very different thing from living it, which people do, about 3 million of them in Rojava every day. And the sacrifice is a part of it. The kind of continual conflict is another part of it, because it's worth emphasizing we're about a decade into the project right now, right? If we consider that being from the start of the self-administration in varying fashions, and that's not a perfectly even process, right? Because it occurred as part of this series of broader conflicts. But what you've seen is both the retreat of the government that had formerly controlled the area. You've seen a successful war prosecuted against ISIS. You've seen what you could look at as one conflict or kind of a series of conflicts with both these Turkish-backed militias and the Turkish military itself. And then this continuing conflict, both with the environment, just because that is really that's a force at work here. This the Cold War that kind of. That's not even a perfect way of describing the situation with the Assad regime and with their backers and their Russian government, but it's a complex interwoven series of conflict, but kind of the result is just a life of conflict for the people who are part of this revolution as sort of just a fact of daily life, and I think that is really hard to grasp.
Mm. I think that's true, and I think there's part of it, like you say, that has to do with the sort of objective situation where the conditions that people are living in, this perpetual conflict that you're talking about. And at the same time, I think there's also an aspect that's more like, I don't know, like subjective, you could call it, that has to do with the kind of movement that they've really actively been building for themselves, and the kind of spirit that their movement has taken on, that they've cultivated themselves sort of painstakingly for years. I mean, I think one of the things that I know Debbie and I really want to get to in our conversations with the speaking tour that we're working on, which is coming up later this month on the West Coast, is while we want people to be inspired by this revolution, we really don't want people to just see it as this very like other thing on the other side of the world. Even those who are really supportive, especially us, anarchists, or you could say fellow travelers, we have a tendency to kind of maybe oversimplify or romanticize what's happening over there and think, oh, well, if the state could just collapse here, I'm sure everybody would just sort of like melt into an anarchist utopia of statelessness. And that would be a mistake too. I think the truth is that what Rojava shows you is a real revolution is incredibly messy. And they only were able to kind of face the threats and the opportunities that crisis brought to them in Syria because of the kind of movement they had built for themselves. And they had these practical tools to kind of help local communities govern themselves in that sort of chaos, in the power vacuum that arose. And, in a moment like this, the world over, especially here in the United States, the crises that we're facing, the crises that we're looking down the barrel of, I think there's been no more kind of relevant or urgent time to think about how those lessons actually could apply here and what it means for us. What kind of movement do we need to build to be ready for that moment?
Yeah, I really agree. And Robert, I'm glad you mentioned, the fact that the revolution is over 10 years old, because I think, and to follow up sort of just on what Arthur was saying, that sort of sometimes the crises that we face, environmental, ecological, global warming, and not to mention democracy itself, can seem almost paralyzing, or that we're constantly in a state of reaction. But one of the things that the revolution in Rojava teaches us is that, first of all, that moments of crisis can also be moments of great transformation, but really only if we're prepared for them. And that's why, whenever I talk about the Rojava project, I feel it's important to remind people that it didn't just spring miraculously out of nowhere in the moment of the Syrian civil war. The folks on the ground there had really been preparing for years, decades even, for the opportunity that opened up for them during the Syrian civil war. And in various ways, of course, they were educating themselves on radical history, in particular, understanding, the failures of classical Marxism, Leninism, which had been embraced previously by the PKK, and putting also into practice clandestinely the kinds of grassroots democratic social structures that we see operating on the ground there today. So I think that that's one of the lessons that we here in the U.S. can absorb, that we need to be able to exploit the crisis of legitimacy that's growing here today by thinking about what kind of alternatives we want to build and showing people that those alternatives exist. That includes engaging in a kind of prefigurative politics that really focuses on things like dual power, cooperative economic project, but also local assembly democratic politics. So that's one of the things that I'm also really excited about talking about as Arthur and I make our way from Seattle down to San Francisco and Oakland during the course of these 6 presentations and chats and talks and discussions that we're really excited about having beginning next weekend.
Yeah. Let's provide people with a little bit of information on how they might be able to attend and take part in that. So, what should folks look up and look into if they're interested, and where are you guys going to be?
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks. I think the best thing people can do is go to defendrojava.org. That's the website for the Emergency Committee for Rojava, our group. But right there at the front page, you're going to see a poster for our tour that you can click on. It'll take you to links for all the different stops that we're going to do. We're going to be making our way all the way from Bellingham, Washington, which is up near the border of Canada, down to the Bay Area. And, we really wish we could make more cities. There are a couple events that our comrades and colleagues are organizing on the East Coast around the same time frame. So be sure to look up the calendar on our website. But people can go to defendrojava.org to hear more. But the basic idea, like Debbie said, is we want to talk to people not only about what's going on in Rojava, why we think it matters, how they can stand in solidarity, but we want to talk about what we're going to do in our own communities to take those lessons and to apply them to our own context. We want to help connect people who are doing real community organizing in local movements, and to try to kind of inspire and strengthen what's already going on, rather than just to see this as being strictly about Rojava. Because, y'all probably were told the same thing when you're over there and you ask people, what can we do to support? One of the things they'll tell you is you got to organize the revolution at home. and that's on us. It's easier said than done, right? And we're not saying we have all the answers, but what we do want to do is to invite local grassroots activists, especially, to come join the discussion. And let's talk together about what it would mean to apply these basic principles, not to copy and paste them, but to apply these basic principles and lessons, principles of direct democracy, local autonomy, cooperation, feminism. We haven't even talked about how central, gender liberation is to the Kurdish freedom movement. How do we apply these things in our own communities?
Yeah.
And one of the things, by the way, if people are interested in getting some more detail and a real inside look at what is going on in Rojava in detail is that Arthur has 2 pieces in the magazine Strange Matters, which is also online, which are just terrific. And they're part of a series that he's going to be doing, I think, monthly over the next few months. And so that's some great background as well.
Aw, shucks.
Yeah, it's fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
And well worth
Thank
reading.
you.
Yeah, check that out. Obviously, folks, if you haven't, we've also got a podcast series, The Women's War, that covers the earlier history of the Rojavan Revolution up to about 2019, late 2019, which will covers quite a bit of the impact that kind of this sort of feminist lens has had on what's happening over there and how it's actually persisted, under the conditions that are really kind of almost impossibly challenging when you look at what these people are up against, which is part of, again, I guess ultimately why, as we've repeatedly come back to, I think this is so important for people in the West to study as things get worse for a lot of folks here. And as we attempt to arrest and take charge of the situation in our own lives. We have all these questions about how do we stop our government from arming not just Turkey, but all of these regimes around the world that are doing such terrible things. How do we stop? How do we arrest, these problems that are continuing to affect, really ultimately billions of people around the world? It's taking charge of our own lives in the same way that these people have. It's kind of making that slogan of the Rojavan Revolution, resistance is life, actually embracing that in a way that matters. And when you focus on sort of the challenges to like the sheer amount of work that has to be done here, the very primitive state of any kind of meaningful resistance, the relatively primitive state of organizing on the left compared to, for example, the organizing that the right does in tandem with paramilitaries in the state, it can seem like an impossible challenge. But 10 years on, the people in Northeast Syria are still fighting, and I think I think paying attention to that makes it clear that it is actually possible to win.
So true.
Well, I guess that's kind of it for us today. Is there anything else we want to plug? I just wanted to go out on a better note.
Yeah. I'm writing a piece for Kurdish Peace Institute. I'm manifesting this on a podcast, so I've actually write it about Myanmar, Kurdistan solidarity, which I think is cool. So,
great topic, yes.
Yeah, I don't think we have a lot of time, but I think that one thing that I've learned from the friends in Rojava is that, even when you are going through difficulties, you can still stand in solidarity with other people. And God knows we're all going through difficulties in economic and political and state violence terms in this country. And I think that one thing I really took from that was that it's never too hard for you to be in solidarity. And I hope that folks who are in this country will appreciate that and be in solidarity with people in Rojava as well.
Absolutely.
Well, Debbie, Arthur, thank you both so much for being here with us, and thank you for continuing to do the work that you do to keep this topic alive in people's hearts and minds.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, always happy.
Yeah.
Keep up the great work yourselves.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's the episode. We will be back tomorrow, unless this comes out on a Friday, in which case we might not be back tomorrow, but we'll be back, Monday. You understand how this works at this point, right?
It Could Happen Here is a production of Cool Zone Media. For more podcasts from Cool Zone Media, visit our website, coolzonemedia.com, or check us out on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find sources for It Could Happen Here updated monthly at coolzonemedia.com/sources. Thanks for listening.
Hey, we'll be back Monday with more episodes every week from now until the heat death of the universe.
There's a fire inside you can't ignore. Stand still? Not a chance. You're a lifelong learner who's come this far. Now, we're here to help you keep going further. Capella University. What can't you do? Visit capella.edu to learn more.
Flag football is exploding, and iFlag is leading the way. As the Guinness World Record holder, iFlag hosts premier flag football tournaments nationwide for boys, girls, high school girls, and adults. From first-time players to elite competitors, iFlag delivers top-level competition, unforgettable experiences, and a community built around the game. Ready to be part of it? Join the movement. Find your tournament and learn more at iflag.org. That's iflag.org.
This is Bethany Frankel from Just Be with Bethany Frankel. Most dog food is marketing, not nutrition. That is why Biggie and Smalls eat just food for dogs, real 100% human-grade food with ingredients I actually recognize. And yes, I do see the difference. Better digestion, healthier skin, more energy, dogs that feel better, my babies. If you've been on the fence about switching, stop overthinking it. What's more important than your furry babies and their health? Go to justfoodfordogs.com right now and get 50% off your first box. No code needed. Just try it.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.